Chapter 266. 10,000 Great Mountains. Subdue Devil Ancient Cave. The subdued Devil Ancient Cave. After the resurrection of the evil beast, the scene was already very different from before, when the dark clouds hung over, the wind howling, although the sky was still dusky, but the black gas that gathered at the cave entrance had already dissipated. The wind that blew out from the cave all year round also disappeared without a trace. Other than the still barren mountain range, there was only that female statue standing at the entrance of the subdued Devil Ancient Cave, still standing there unmoved in the wind and rain. And right in front of it, dressed in bright silk clothes, was an extremely handsome, and could even be said to be a seductive youth. Fairer than the average girl's face, thin eyebrows, red eyes, thin lips and sharp chin. Looking carefully, this face indistinctly resembled that female statue. Just that, the temperament on both of their faces were entirely different. This youth was the evil beast who was resurrected from the subdued Devil Ancient Cave. No one would have expected. The demon that instilled fear in countless of southern border people was actually this handsome youth. From the day of his resurrection, for some reason, he did not do anything, neither massacred wantonly nor did he roar in ecstasy, only quietly stood in front of Linglong Shaman Lady's statue, quietly watching. A black shadow flashed, the evil shaman soundlessly floated over from afar, came behind the youth. Beast Deity Master. The youth did not move, did not even turn his head, said, "How is it?" The evil shaman stared at his back, said, "The 13 demon kings have already subdued the remaining barbarians in the 10,000 Great Mountains. All of them are under the command of the Beast Deity Master." Only then did the young man's body move. He slowly turned around and said indifferently, "How many clans are left?" The evil shaman said, "Now only 37 tribes. In these 100 years, the 10,000 Great Mountains are like dragons without a leader. The various barbarians killed each other, many tribes were exterminated." The youth coldly laughed. There was no disappointment on his face, on the contrary, there was an indistinct, untamed feeling emanating from the depths of his heart. His eyes, like lightning, scanned the evil shaman's face, which was covered by the black veil. The evil shaman suddenly felt that his face felt like it was being burned by a fire. "Actually, it should be the 38 tribes. That youth leisurely said, "Isn't there still you, the last successor of the Black Shaman tribe?" The evil shaman lowered his head, remained silent. The youth slowly turned his head. His eyes once again landed on Linglong Shaman Lady's face. After staring for a long time, he suddenly called out, "Blackwood." The evil shaman's body shook, this name to him, like a wound carved deep in his heart. Every time it was called out, it hurt him once. The young man stared at Linglong's statue, and his voice suddenly became filled with the vicissitudes of life. "After so many years, have you ever regretted being in front of Linglong?" The evil shaman was silent. After a long while he quietly said, "Yes." The young man didn't even turn back. His eyes flickered with a strange light, and he faintly said, "In this world, other than your big brother who turned into a ferocious spirit, only you know the relationship between me and Linglong. Back then, the 8 of you chased me through mountains and rivers. Now that I think about it, it seems like it was only yesterday." The evil shaman's body under the black veil suddenly started to tremble, as if the past events were still vivid in his mind. But that young man did not notice the lich's reaction at all. His words, rather than saying that he was talking to the lich, it would be better to say that he was talking to the statue in a low voice. In his eyes, there was only the statue of Linglong which. "You," he said, his voice slowly growing sad, sorrowful, and indignant, "what are you doing this for?" The stone statue was speechless, and stood there silently. "In your heart are the common people of the world, the destiny of the heavens, and good fortune all that important?" The young man's voice suddenly grew excited and louder. "If you value them more than me, so you want to get rid of me, is that it?" The expression on the young man's face was a strange and bewitching cold smile. "But do you know, I don't care at all. What bullsh*t will of heaven? What living beings in the world? What do they count for? His expression became more and more mournful. The strange thing was that even though the expression in his eyes was extremely terrifying, his appearance became more and more seductive and beautiful, almost unlike that of an ordinary person. If you want me to die, just say one word, it's enough, do you know? Do you know? He roared sternly, facing that statue lady, and then, slowly, his voice became softer. But why? You actually view those things as more important than yourself, more important than your own life. Slowly, he stretched out his hand, gently caressed that face that had weathered countless years of wind and frost, gradually roughened, brushed past the deep memories, that once gentle face. An icy cold feeling, without a trace of warmth, slowly came from his palm. Opening his arms, gently hugging the statue in his arms, the young man's expression slowly turned into a strange gentleness. The evil shaman stood behind, quietly watching that strange scene. I know it is the common people of the world who harmed you. That young man half closed his eyes, softly said as if he was sleep-talking, Don't worry, I will let everything be buried with you, and then I will come and find you, you wait for me. The low voice quietly lowered and finally disappeared. The bewitching young man hugged the ice-cold statue, the evil shaman in black stood woodenly, the dark clouds in the sky with a sudden clap of thunder, raindrops floated down from the horizon. The heavy rain floated down in the wind, making this world hazy, indistinctly. The evil shaman stared blankly. The raindrops landed on that statue lady's face, silently slid down, like tears. 3,000 miles to the east of Qin Yun Mountain, beside the ancient path that extended southeast from Kongsang Mountain, in the silent wilderness, it was the season where the grass grew tall and the orioles flew. The He family's small shop that was one day's journey from Shaoqi town, like in the past, stood alone beside the ancient path, welcoming and sending off the passing travelers. The owner of the small shop, shopkeeper Ho, naturally could not remember how many customers he had welcomed and sent off. As for the passing travelers, naturally there were all kinds of people. But in these 3 days, he gradually confirmed, although he was getting older, but most probably he would remember this customer. Actually, to say it was a customer, it was also not accurate. To be honest, it should be a customer with a strange monkey. And to shopkeeper Ho, what left a deep impression on him was that strange three-eyed monkey's usefulness, instead was even greater. 3 days ago, shopkeeper Ho, who was standing outside the shop beside the ancient path and soliciting customers, saw this travel-worn, bewildered man walking over from the ancient path, with a three-eyed monkey on his shoulder. For some reason, he felt that he looked familiar. When he went up to welcome him, he wanted to say some extravagant flowery words to pull this customer into the shop to rest, but unexpectedly he only said one sentence, "Customer, our shop has hot tea and good wine, why don't you rest inside?" Before he could finish his words, that haggard-looking man suddenly disappeared from his sight. The next moment, when shopkeeper Ho recovered his senses, that man was already sitting beside the wooden table in his shop. And on the table, an ingot of silver, enough to eat and drink in this shop for 3 days without stopping. Shopkeeper Ho was naturally delighted, hurriedly served the dishes and wine, just that out of his expectation, this customer and this monkey really stayed in his little shop like that for 3 days and 3 nights, until today they did not seem to have any intention of leaving. That man's mental state was obviously not good. In these 3 days, shopkeeper Ho did not see him speak once, smile once. Each time he served the food and wine, that man only quietly watched the wine pot and then slowly drank. Just that this customer's alcohol tolerance seemed to be extremely poor. Each time he drank a little, shopkeeper Ho estimated that it was not even half a pot, he would collapse on the table, unconscious. And contrary to the owner, the three-eyed monkey that the man brought made shopkeeper Ho dumbstruck. Honestly speaking, shopkeeper Ho's shop here, although the place was secluded, but because there were many customers passing by, he was considered as someone with some knowledge. But in these 3 days, he had already swore numerous times in his heart that he had really seen the monkey who could drink the most in his entire life, the one with the highest alcohol tolerance. Just in a day and night's time, all the good wine stored in shopkeeper Ho's shop, including the jar of Nuerhong liquor hidden under the old locust tree at the back of the shop, were all finished by this monkey. And this monkey evidently still looked like it had not had enough, scratching its ears and cheeks, looking around, jumping for a long time and calling out to shopkeeper Ho non-stop. Although shopkeeper Ho did not understand the monkey language, but even a fool could tell what the monkey meant. Originally he did not want to bother, but unexpectedly this monkey was as clever as a ghost, secretly stole the silver that shopkeeper Ho kept and swayed it here and there in front of shopkeeper Ho. Shopkeeper Ho was helpless, moreover the other party had already paid enough silver. He could only send his waiter to deliver the wine from Shaoqi town overnight. At the start he was still rather annoyed, but after a while, he actually started to like this monkey. And other than loving to drink, this three-eyed monkey did not have any other bad traits. Instead it often played around in the shop. When it was in a good mood, it even did a few acrobatics. For example, it could produce a bunch of flames from its hands out of thin air. Not only shopkeeper Ho's eyes were glued to it, the other customers who passed by for the past few days were also in high spirits. Staying longer in shopkeeper Ho's shop allowed him to earn even more silver. As for the owner of the gray-haired three-eyed monkey, he was the complete opposite of the lively monkey. Most of the time, he was sleeping, reeking of alcohol. When he woke up once in a while, he would only look around with listless eyes. Occasionally, the monkey would run back to his side. Only then would there be some light in his eyes. He stretched out his hand lazily and patted the monkey's head. Then, he seemed to remember something sad and picked up the wine pot to drink again. After a while, he fell asleep again. Chapter 267. Sometimes shopkeeper Ho also secretly thought, could this man be a lunatic? Just that although he was only an ordinary shopkeeper, but he could still feel that this man was different from other passers-by. Not to mention other things, just the 3 days this man stayed in the small shop, the mosquitoes, which were usually the most abundant at this time of the night, suddenly all disappeared. Furthermore, every night, the ghostly cries which often reverberated in the wilderness outside the shop seemed to be frightened by something, all disappeared. So much so that shopkeeper Ho was used to these ghostly cries and wolf howls. Suddenly it was so quiet these 3 days, he actually could not sleep. This day at dusk, shopkeeper Ho stood behind the shop counter, closed the account book which he had just calculated and heaved a long sigh. Following which, he looked into his own shop. The setting sun outside the window still had a faint remnant light, at the same time illuminating the horizon red. It also shone in from the shop's windows, elongating the shadows of the tables and chairs on the ground, as if time was also quietly passing by here. Shopkeeper Ho's mood suddenly felt strange, a wave of bewilderment in his heart, calculating, he should already be over 50. Although the assistant who helped always said he looked around 40, but he himself knew his body was gradually failing. Time spared no man. Was he going to live like this for the rest of his life? He stared blankly at the gradually elongating shadows on the ground. When he lifted his head, he saw the mottled marks on the 4 walls of the shop. The lonely setting sun shone on his face, had some inexplicable vicissitudes of life. He sighed, shook his head. These things, better not think about it. Shopkeeper Ho laughed bitterly, picked up the account book and walked towards the only customer in the shop and his monkey. That customer always sat at the innermost table. Right now, as usual, he was slumped on the table drunk, not moving. And that monkey was squatting on the table, left hand holding the wine pot, right hand grabbing the delicacies from the dishes on the table, drinking a mouthful of wine, eating a mouthful of food, passing the days with relish. Shopkeeper Ho walked over to that customer, coughed once, cleared his throat, but his eyes could not help but glance at that monkey. The three-eyed monkey clearly did not care about his arrival, only glanced at him and again turned its attention back to the wine pot in its hand. Shopkeeper Ho sighed. This monkey was really the only animal he had ever seen that was so addicted to alcohol, and on its back it carried a big wine bag, although it was already shriveled, but one could imagine what was stored in it in the past. Shopkeeper Ho looked away for some reason. He felt nervous, even he himself could not explain it. He coughed a few more times and then carefully said, "This customer." The man in front of him did not move. Shopkeeper Ho was a little embarrassed, but he still continued, Customer, it's like this, the ingot of silver that you paid 3 days ago has already been used up. Our shop has a small profit margin, is it?" She didn't know if the man was really drunk, but he just lay there and didn't move. Shopkeeper Ho sighed, stammered, "Actually, the ingot of silver that customer paid was indeed not little, not to mention eating in our shop for 3 days. Even if it was for 5 days, it would be enough. Just that. Just that your precious animal is really too powerful, its alcohol tolerance is too big, just these 3 days, not to mention it has already finished all the wine in our shop. The other 4 vats of wine that were sent over in 2 batches were also finished by it." Speaking till here, Boss Ho looked at the 3-eyed monkey again, only to see the monkey stare at him and make a face. Shopkeeper Ho humbly said, "Can I ask you to pay a little more? Right, the ingot of silver that you paid 3 days ago was also stolen by your precious animal, and it has not been returned." Before he could finish, suddenly a sound was heard. An ingot of silver bounced twice on the table and appeared before Shopkeeper Ho. Shopkeeper Ho looked intently. It was the monkey who had fished out that stolen ingot of silver from somewhere, throwing his face. Shopkeeper Ho quickly kept it in his bosom, but hesitated for a moment, glanced at that monkey, took out the silver again, pulled open his lapel and placed it in his inner clothes. Just as he kept the silver and was about to speak to that man again, a voice was suddenly heard from the shop entrance. "Anybody in?" Shopkeeper Ho was surprised, turned back and saw 3 people standing at the entrance, 2 males and a female. The leader was an elderly, holding a bamboo pole in his hand. A piece of white cloth hung on it, written on it, "Immortal Guide 4 words." Beside him was a 17 or 18-year-old young lady, her features delicate, a slight smile on her face. Of the 2 of them, the old one had a sage-like demeanor, while the young one was beautiful and delicate. Behind the 2 of them stood a middle-aged man who was holding all of the parcels. However, he had a strange appearance. He was taller than the 2 of them by a head, but his face was like that of a wild dog, making him look disgusting. Shopkeeper Ho hurriedly went up to welcome them. After all, a customer with a monkey obviously would not sneak away. It was better to first greet the new customer. He went up with a smile and said, Yes, 3 customers, would you like to have a meal or stay?" The elderly leader laughed, squinted his eyes and said, "Why, Shopkeeper Ho, you don't recognize us." Shopkeeper Ho was stunned, carefully scrutinized that elderly, but no matter how he tried, he could not recall. He was doing business beside this ancient path, and there were so many passers-by. How could he remember them all? He could only awkwardly shook his head and said, "Apologies, customers, I am old and my memory is failing." That elderly looked sympathetic, shook his head and sighed. Pity, most of the mortals in the world are like this, with celestial fate in front of them, they have no discerning eyes to know." Shopkeeper Ho was shocked. Immediately a sense of reverence rose in him, carefully looked at this elderly, saw his white beard fluttering, crane bones and celestial demeanor. Most likely he was an enlightened master. Although he did not know why an enlightened master looked like a Jianghu fortune-teller, and the young lady beside the elderly had a disapproving expression, but since he was an enlightened master, naturally he, a mortal, would not be able to understand. If he understood, wouldn't he also become an enlightened master? Thinking of that, Shopkeeper Ho's face had already gained some respect, respectfully said, Yes, this customer." "No, master, please come in." The elderly acknowledged. his hand holding the bamboo pole, and swaggered in. The young lady behind him smiled bitterly and shook her head, turned and spoke to the man carrying the bundle behind her. "Wild dog Taoist, let's also go in and rest for a while." That man acknowledged and followed in. The three of them sat at a table. The dog-faced man placed the bundle on the chair beside. A sound was heard, seemed like the weight was not light. These three people were naturally Tanis Ka and Xiao Huan. As for that dog-faced man, he was the only remaining wild dog Taoist from Blood Forger Hall. Ever since the Battle of Death Marsh, Wild Dog Taoist followed Tanis Ka and Xiao Huan, roaming the world, the four seas as his home. At the beginning, Tanis Isian really disliked Wild Dog. Every 2 or 3 days he would pick on Wild Dog. From time to time he would make sarcastic remarks, and Wild Dog Taoist, for some reason, as if he had turned over a new leaf, completely changed into another person, he pretended not to hear and still followed them all the way, and Xiao Huan was kind-hearted, could not stand it, and spoke up to protect him. Although she was young but her tongue was sharp, even though Tanis Ka was an experienced Jianghu person, he was often speechless and finally could only accept the fact. Fortunately, after a long time, he gradually discovered that Wild Dog was not completely useless. For example, the heavy items that he usually had to carry could now all be thrown to this coolie, and this coolie, in Xiao Huan's slightly apologetic eyes, did not have the slightest disgust. Instead, he looked very happy. As for other benefits, like encountering wild beasts in the wild, encountering ghosts on the road, encountering strong people when crossing the mountain, etc., etc., naturally this wild dog hero would be sent to settle them. Along the way, Tanis Ka felt extremely comfortable. He had roamed the world for his entire life, and had never walked as comfortably as these few months. He only hated that he did not meet Wild Dog earlier. In this period of time, the three of them revisited the old haunt. Since they were roaming the world, they could go to any place. As they walked and walked, they returned to this ancient path. Luckily, Zhou Isian was like a shrewd ghost. He still remembered Shopkeeper Ho, a shopkeeper by the roadside, and pretended to be an expert, scaring Shopkeeper Ho into a state of shock. Seeing Shopkeeper Ho was so respectful to him, Tanis Ka was very pleased. He arrogantly ordered a few dishes, when Shopkeeper Ho quickly left to prepare. He then turned back and was about to brag to Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist. Suddenly Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, for some reason, a disbelieving expression appeared on their faces, their eyes staring straight at the ground. Tanis Ka asked curiously, "Hey, what's wrong with you all?" Wild Dog Taoist raised his seemingly heavy arm, pointed to the depths of the shop. "Look for yourself." Tanis Ka stared at him, turned around, and suddenly his body also shook. In the sunset, the last ray of light shone through the window. In the dim corner of the shop, there was a man's figure, and on the table, in the shadows, a three-eyed monkey was looking at them. Xiao Huan was stunned, quietly called out, "Xiao Hui?" Chapter 268. Placing the steaming hot dishes on the table, Shopkeeper Ho retreated behind the counter, opened the account book again, pretended to be doing the accounts. Just that his eyes moved slightly, between the lines, he secretly glanced at the customers in the shop. Tanis Ka, Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, the three of them, were already sitting at the three-eyed gray-furred monkey Xiao Hui's table. As for the new dishes, naturally they were also sent to this table, just that they had no appetite. Only Xiao Hui was rather happy, gulping down the wine and eating, looking very happy. Tanis Ka and the rest of their eyes, right now, were not looking at Xiao Hui, but quietly at the other side of the table, at the man who was sitting. Xiao Huan was silent for a long time, slowly stretched out her hand, pushed that man, quietly called out, "Ghost." Li. That man's body moved a little from her push but did not have any reaction. Tanis Ka and Wild Dog glanced at each other. That man's figure and appearance was naturally that ghostly they had seen in the past, just that this figure who once made countless people tremble in fear, right now had become so abject, they could not react for a moment. Xiao Huan turned her head, asked in shock, "How did he become like this?" Tanis Ka stared, shrugged his shoulders, said, "Don't ask the two of us." He paused, suddenly frowned, turned to Xiao Hui who was still sitting on the table, revealed a smile and said, "Little monkey, what happened to your master?" Xiao Hui's 3 eyes turned at the same time, glanced at this sage-like old man, did not have any other reaction, only one of its tails stood up, swayed a few times behind it. After a moment, suddenly a sound came out from its mouth, swaggeringly turned its head to drink a mouthful of wine, totally disregarding this old man who looked like a deity. Tanis Ka lost his face, immediately could not hold it, angrily said, "Stupid monkey, dare to show me that face, you are rebelling. If you anger your immortal, wait till I use immortal skills to subdue you and suppress you under Qing Yun Hill, seal you for 1,800 years, see if you are afraid." Before he finished, Zhou Yixian heard a whistling sound, his vision darkened, as if something was charging towards him. He could not dodge it in time. Xiao Huan who was beside also cried out in alarm. Luckily a hand stretched out from the side and swiftly pushed Zhou Yixian, pushing the old man to the ground. Zhou Yixian was caught off guard and fell on his back. His celestial appearance was almost ruined, but he managed to avoid the thing that was thrown at him. At this time, the object smashed into the air and flew a distance away. With a "doo" sound, it smashed into the wall of the store and fell down. It was the bone of a roasted chicken. Everyone, including shopkeeper Ho, who was watching from afar, turned around and saw the 3-eyed monkey holding a chicken drumstick in its hand, chewing on it happily, not knowing if it threw the bone out with its hand or directly spat it out with its mouth. Zhou Yixian gritted his teeth in hatred, but his experience was after all not to be underestimated. He knew this monkey was a rare spiritual creature and looking at it, it seemed to have a bad temper, better not to provoke it. Moreover, behind it was its master Ghostly, who was famous for his thirst for blood. If that guy woke up, it would be even more troublesome. Immediately he crawled up cursing, rolled his eyes and angrily said to Wild Dog Taoist, "You are deliberately trying to kill me. Why did you use so much strength to push your immortal?" Wild Dog was speechless. If it was his previous temper, he would have scolded back. Just that now his dog eyes turned and actually turned his head away, ignoring Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian was given the cold shoulder. He was even more annoyed and was about to say something when Xiao Huan scolded, "Grandpa." In recent years, Zhou Yixian was most afraid of this sharp-tongued granddaughter. He immediately stopped, but his mouth was still mumbling something, obviously unwilling. Xiao Huan ignored him, turned and looked at Xiao Hui, revealed a smile and said, "Xiao Hui, do you still remember me? I gave you candied haws to eat." Xiao Hui's eyes looked at Xiao Huan, its 3 eyes blinked and blinked, suddenly nodded, grinned and even wagged its tail twice, not knowing if it learned it from that yellow dog, De Huang, at Qing Yun Hill Big Bamboo Valley many years ago. Xiao Huan giggled, said, "Didn't expect you still remember me, come over," and beckoned to the monkey. Xiao Hui's eyes turned, stretched its hand to its head, looking like it was slightly perplexed, habitually wanted to scratch its head, but unexpectedly one of its hands was holding the wine pot, the other was holding the chicken drumstick. Both were not free, so it might as well use the chicken drumstick to rub its furry head a few times, leaving a few oil stains. Xiao Huan covered her mouth and laughed lightly. Xiao Hui looked at her smile, also grinned and then slowly moved over, came to the table in front of Xiao Huan and squatted down. Zhou Yixian, Wild Dog and shopkeeper Ho at a distance all stared. Xiao Huan carefully assessed the monkey, took out a silk handkerchief from her bosom, frowned and said, "Throw away the thing in your hand." The 3-eyed monkey was startled. It squeaked a few times, clearly not very willing. Xiao Huan lightly patted its head and said, "Quick!" Xiao Hui curled its lips, put the drumstick back on the plate, took another look and was about to put down the wine pot, but suddenly took a big gulp and then put it back on the table. Xiao Huan shook her head and laughed, said, "Why did it become so gluttonous?" After speaking, she pulled both of Xiao Hui's monkey hands in front of her, used the silk handkerchief to carefully wipe away the oil stains on the monkey's hands. Xiao Hui did not move an inch, allowing Xiao Huan to do as she pleased. It was strange, other than its master Ghostly, the monkey only had some good feelings towards a few other females. As for those like Zhou Yixian, Wild Dog, it seemed to never like them. After wiping, Xiao Huan placed the silk handkerchief aside, glanced at Ghostly who reeked of alcohol, said to Xiao Hui, "How did he become like this?" Xiao Hui scratched its head, started to call out, at the same time waving its arms. The crowd stared at each other. Obviously no one understood. Xiao Hui seemed to have realized this and stopped. Suddenly, the monkey pointed at Xiao Huan, almost poked Xiao Huan's face. Xiao Huan jumped in fright. Wild Dog Taoist wanted to move, thought this monkey's wild nature was hard to tame, but unexpectedly he was pulled back by Zhou Yixian. Wild Dog was surprised, looked at Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian quietly said, "Watch first." Xiao Hui at this moment pointed at Xiao Huan, and then its body suddenly somersaulted on the table, jumped to the middle of the table, its mouth in noises, gesturing at Xiao Huan, and then both of its hands moved from top to bottom along the curve of its body. Xiao Huan was stunned. Zhou Yixian frowned and said, "Woman?" Xiao Hui nodded its head repeatedly, and then pointed to Ghostly who had fallen down, both of its hands cupped in a heart shape. Its mouth called out a few times. Suddenly its body fell backwards, its entire monkey body fell straight down. Xiao Huan suddenly called out, "Careful!" Before she finished, Xiao Hui was too engrossed in its performance. It forgot that this was only a small table. Its bouncing had unknowingly reached the edge of the table. This fall, a sound was heard, it immediately fell under the table. Xiao Huan found it funny and worried, quickly wanted to get up to check, but a sound. The monkey had already scurried up again, both hands on the floor, grinning at Xiao Huan. Xiao Huan saw that the monkey did not seem to be injured and was relieved. She patted its head. Xiao Hui's eyes blinked, looked at Xiao Huan. Xiao Huan pondered for a moment, looked at Ghost Li's figure again, turned to Zhou Yixian and said, "Grandpa, he is." Zhou Yixian frowned and said, "Don't tell me he was injured by a woman?" With his current skills and Ghost King sex power, in this world, not many women can do this. Is it Qing Yun's sex Shueyue, or evil sect Hehuan sex Samyao? Wild Dog Taoist, who had been sitting at the side, suddenly said, "I don't think so." Zhou Yixian angrily said, "What did you say? Actually dare to say, old man, this immortal is wrong." Wild Dog Taoist did not look at him. A strange expression appeared on his dog face. Looking at that fallen figure, slowly said, "From what I know, he is not the kind of man who places much importance on victory or defeat, and besides, he does not have any injuries on him." Zhou Yixian snorted, disapprovingly said, "That is because your skills and others are too far apart. If it is like you who only know a few tricks, fight and lose, naturally you will not place much importance on victory and defeat. Every day say, victory and defeat are common in military." Chapter 269. Wild Dog Taoist was enraged and was about to retort when Tawny glared at them, raised her voice and said, "All right, stop it." Tanis Ka and Wild Dog then stopped at the same time, but still looked at each other angrily. Tawny thought for a moment and then nodded, seemed to have made some decision, and then spoke to the monkey squatting in front of her. "Xiao Hui, all of you come with us first." "What?" Before Xiao Hui could react, Tanis Ka and Wild Dog Taoist shouted out first. Their voices were so loud that even shopkeeper Ho was shocked. Tawny glanced at them and said, "What is it?" Wild Dog Taoist for a moment stuttered, mumbled, He has too many enemies, I'm afraid there will be trouble." Tawny said, "I am not even afraid, what are you afraid of?" Wild Dog Taoist was silent, but Tanis Ka beside him could not take it, angrily said to Tawny, "We are not running a charity hall, why are you taking in people all day?" Tawny stared at her grandfather, said, "He is not someone else, he saved my life in the Death Marsh." And, she suddenly laughed meaningfully and said, Grandfather, more than 10 years ago you cheated him of his good luck in stepping on dog shit, do you still remember? Wild Dog Taoist was surprised. Tanis Ka instead blushed, angrily said, Why are you bringing up the old scores of more than 10 years? Tawny snorted, indifferently said, It's good that you remember, anyway I cannot just watch and do nothing. After speaking, she ignored her grandfather and turned to look at Ghostly. When the man's body was gently turned over, a whiff of alcohol hit her. Tawny frowned, but on that familiar face, both eyes tightly closed but his brows were frowned together, not sure if even when he was drunk, he was still sad. Tawny quietly looked at the man's face, her mind suddenly flashed past that day outside the Death Marsh. This man walked to her fortune-telling stall and quietly said, You have grown up. Tanis Khan naturally did not know that his granddaughter was suddenly having wild thoughts, but he knew very clearly that he was going to have another big trouble under such circumstances. How could his mood be good? He hatefully turned his head, stared at Ghostly, loudly said, Shopkeeper, settle the bill. Shopkeeper Ho quickly ran over, smiled and said, Customer, you are not going to stay for a while? Tanis Ka grumpily said, Stay? I have already caused a big trouble by staying for a while. If I stay any longer I will be troubled to death. Shopkeeper Ho controlled his laughter, said, Thank you, customer, 4 silvers. Zhou Yisian mumbled, took out the money from his bosom. Suddenly Xiao Hui scurried over, brought the big wine bag in front of it and waved it at Shopkeeper Ho, ZZ, non-stop. Tanis Ka, Tawny and the rest were surprised, did not know what the monkey was doing. Instead, Shopkeeper Ho had been with the monkey for 3 days, more or less knew a little. Right now he frowned, pondered for a moment, suddenly said, Are you going to add wine into the wine bag? To Xiao Tian Xiao. Tanis Ka and others were stunned. After a while, Tawny coughed, laughed dryly and said, Shopkeeper, just help it add some wine. Shopkeeper Ho was elated, quickly acknowledged, and went back to get the wine. Speaking of which, this big wine bag was really huge. As the wine was poured in, the wine bag gradually bulged, but Shopkeeper Ho poured in 2 jars of wine, and it was still not full. Xiao Hui was beaming with joy at the side. Zhou Yisian could not bear it anymore, disregarding his celestial identity, jumped up and angrily said, Enough, enough, who? A black shadow flew towards him. Zhou Yisian was now experienced and immediately dodged when he heard the sound. As expected, it was Xiao Hui who threw a dish plate at him. With a pring sound, it smashed onto the ground and broke into pieces. Zhou Yisian was about to speak again. The plates on the table were continuously thrown by Xiao Hui. He dodged left and right and could not be bothered to say anything more. Just that Shopkeeper Ho heard the clear, shattering sounds of plates, immediately felt heartache and looked at the wine bag, which was actually not much left, quickly said, Forget it, the remaining wine is my gift. Master Monkey, don't throw the plates, this celestial, just take it as the money for 2 jars of wine. Xiao Hui then stopped, Zhou Yisian stopped, panting heavily, cursing but did not dare to go near that hot-tempered 3-eyed monkey. Xiao Huan smiled, turned her gaze back to Ghostly but did not notice that Wild Dog Taoist, who had not made a sound for a long time, was also staring at Ghostly, his eyes gradually glimmering with a strange glint. Qing Yun Hill, Tong Tian Peak. Below the stone steps in front of the Crystal Hall main hall, in the aqua-cold pool, Qing Yun Sek's mountain guardian spiritual beast water unicorn leisurely flipped its body in the water waves tumbled, its huge body pressed down on all sides, setting off layers of waves, extremely spectacular. Fenxiang Valley disciple Li Sun stared at the jade-cold pool for a while, turned his head and smiled. I have long heard that Qing Yun Sek's guardian spiritual beast water unicorn is a 1,000-years-old spiritual beast. Seeing it now, it really is extraordinary. Li's senior brother is too kind. A clear laughter came from beside Li Sun, the most famous disciple of Jadian Tong Tian Peak. Xiao Yikai, who was accompanying Li Sun, looked at the water unicorn, smiled and said, Speaking of venerable spirit, It is the spiritual beast that our sect's Greenleaf Grandmaster tamed back then. Thinking back to the Grandmaster's demeanor back then, it really makes us and the other younger disciples admire it. Li Sun nodded and smiled. He came from a famous good faction sect. His eyes were on top of his head but towards that brilliant Qing Yi founder. He was also full of admiration. Xiao Yikai stretched out his hand and gestured towards the mountain top, said, "Li Senior brother please." Li Sun modestly gave way for a moment, walked with Xiao Yikai at the same time. Xiao Yikai said while walking, "I wonder what is the reason for Li Senior brother's visit this time?" Li Sun smiled and said, "Nothing much, just that my teacher has a letter. He wants me to hand it to Reverend Daoxian." Xiao Yikai was surprised, emotionally said, "Why, don't tell me your esteemed Valley Master Yun Elder Senior has already come out from seclusion. A while ago I heard Lu Sweki Jr. sister, who just returned from southern border, Yun Elder Senior is still in seclusion?" Li Sun smiled and said, "To be honest, Xiao Senior brother, my teacher just came out from seclusion a few days ago. I heard from him that he has not seen his Central Plains Reverend Daoxian, Puhong Master and other old friends for many years. He is very concerned and had the intention to pay a visit." Xiao Yikai's countenance changed slightly and then laughed and said, "This can't be any better, Yun Elder Senior's Immortal visit. It is really a big matter that our Central Plains good faction has not had for a long time." Li Sun turned and looked. Xiao Yikai looked at him. Both of them stared for a long time, suddenly laughed out loud at the same time, looking extremely delighted. Xiao Yikai grabbed Li Sun's hand, smiled and said, "Let's go. My teacher is coincidentally chatting with the various teacher uncles in Crystal Hall today. Let me lead the way and introduce Li Senior brother." Li Sun smiled and said, "Then I will have to trouble Xiao Senior brother." After a few steps, he seemed to suddenly recall something, said to Xiao Yikai, "Oh right, Xiao Senior brother, there is one more thing I want to ask." Xiao Yikai smiled and said, "Li Senior brother please speak your mind." Li Sun said, "Previously Qin Yun sect sent Lu Sweki Jr. sister to southern border to visit my teacher." Xiao Yikai's countenance changed slightly and then returned to normal, but this expression was still seen by Li Sun. Li Sun was moved but continued to speak. "That day when we parted, Lu Jr.'s sister seemed to be slightly injured, speaking of which she was injured because she was helping our Fenxiang Valley. I feel very uneasy. I wonder if she is well these days?" Xiao Yikai thought for a moment, said, "Thank you Li Senior brother for your concern. Lu Jr.'s sister is well. Just nice. Today Shueiyue teacher uncle also brought her disciples Wen Min and Lu Sweki over. Later you will be able to see her." Li Sun's face could not help but reveal a trace of joy, nodded and acknowledged. Xiao Yikai looked at his expression, did not speak. Both of them walked up, on the way the topic had changed, all talking about unimportant things. Not long after, both of them had already walked up the stone steps, arrived at Tong Tian Peak Crystal Hall. A grand scale, imposing enormous building, appeared in front of Li Sun. Li Sun stared for a long time, sighed and said, "I initially thought Fenxiang Valley Mountain River Hall, Inferno Altar was already the world's masterpiece. Seeing it today, I then know that there is always someone better, there is always a heaven beyond heaven." Xiao Yikai laughed and said, "Li Senior brother is too polite, come, this way please." Li Sun laughed, followed Xiao Yikai over, came to the front of Crystal Hall, took a deep breath, tidied his clothes and then strode in. Chapter 270. In Crystal Hall, Reverend Doyle Shun wore a dark green Taoist robe. His long beard hanging down to his chest, sat on the main seat of the hall. On both sides of the seats were the heads of other houses of Jadian. 10 years ago at Jadian Hill Battle, 3 of the 7 houses of Jadian changed their heads. Compared to the time when Shah Danan and Bei first came to Jadian, things were still the same, but the people were different. Apart from Dragon Head Peak's Taoist Master Vasp Kalo's position, which was replaced by Kevern, the other 2 peaks changed. Morning Sun Peak's head Shang Zhengliang's position was replaced by his disciple Chu Yuhong, and Sunset Peak's head Master Tian Yun's position was replaced by his junior brother Taoist Master Fei Yun. Among these three branches, other than Sunset Peak's Taoist Fei Yun and Reverend Daoxian, who were of the same generation, they could still exchange a few words. Long Shou Peak and Morning Sun Peak's heads were more awkward. Dragon Head Peak Kevern was still alright, after all he was one of the best among the younger generation, he was still familiar with the teachers. As for Sunrise Peak Chu Yuhong, he sat silently at the back, did not speak from beginning to end. And those older generation heads, Big Bamboo Valley Tian Belize, Small Bamboo Valley Master Shueihua Master and Return of the Wind Valley Xing Shuchang, had not seen each other for a long time, and the few heads who usually quarreled with them were not there. The atmosphere in the hall was more harmonious than before. Behind Shueihua Master stood Anan and Wenmin. After not seeing each other for a period of time, Anan's face was still as beautiful as before. Her face did not show joy or anger, but for some reason, her body faintly exuded a slight chill that was not usually seen. As for Wenmin, she also stood behind Shueihua Master, but her eyes were not so honest. From time to time she glanced sideways, most likely saw Xavion who was standing behind Tian Belize. Every time Xavion saw this, he could not help but smile, looked quite simple and honest. Wenmin glared at him, and then turned back. Next to Tian Belize, his wife Suru also came over, called Tian Linger who came with Kiheo to her side. Mother and daughter spoke quietly, not seeing each other for a long time. Both of them seemed to have endless things to talk about. And following Kiheo, other than Tian Linger, was his junior brother Lin Jingyu. Right now, he was standing at the back, together with Return of the Wind Valley head Xing Shuchang's son Xing Shushu. They had experienced the Death Marsh battle together, and could be considered to be friends. This Qing Yun gathering was also not a formal occasion. Most of the people were more relaxed, even Reverend Daoxian, Tian Bui, Xing Shuchang, Shueihua Master and the rest's conversation content was also rather relaxed. Other than the usually cold Shueihua, the rest of the people's faces mostly carried smiles. When Fenxiang Valley Li Sun walked into the Crystal Hall, what he saw before his eyes was such a scene, just that the next moment, his eyes were on that frosty lady, flickering like a flame. Xiao Yikai walked up and said to Reverend Daoxian, "Master, Li Sun Li Senior brother is here." Reverend Daoxian smiled and looked over. Li Sun walked to Xiao Yikai's side, bowed to Reverend Daoxian, said, "Fenxiang Valley Junior Li Sun greets Reverend Daoxian." Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, "Forget it, quickly get up." Li Sun obeyed and got up, and then cupped his hands and bowed to the surroundings, said, "Junior Li Sun greets Qing Yun Senior's teacher uncles." Tian Bui, Xing Shuchang and the rest all nodded in acknowledgement. Reverend Daoxian said, "Your master is still well, not seen for many years. I wonder how Yun brother's situation is. Some time ago I heard that Yun Valley Master suddenly went into seclusion. I was really worried for a while." Xiao Yikai had already walked to stand beside Reverend Daoxian, heard those words, smiled and said, "Master, you don't know, just now I heard Li Senior brother said, Yun Senior has already come out of seclusion." Reverend Daoxian was slightly surprised. Said to Li Sun, "Really, nephew?" Li Sun respectfully said, "It is indeed so. My master indeed came out of seclusion a few days ago, and specially sent a disciple to visit sect head Daoxian. There is also a letter, ordered me to pass it to Reverend." After speaking, he took out a sealed envelope from his bosom and passed it to Reverend Daoxian. Reverend Daoxian took the letter, after a moment, tore open the seal, took out the thin letter paper, read it carefully from beginning to end. Everyone's eyes were on his face. Only Reverend Daoxian's expression was the same as usual, without any change. Nobody could tell what ups and downs he was feeling. After a while, Reverend Daoxian finished reading the letter, slowly kept the letter paper, put it back into the envelope, stroked it for a moment, placed it on the tea table beside him. Li Sun carefully looked at Reverend Daoxian, but did not hear what the so-called number one person of the good faction had to say. He couldn't help but feel uneasy. Reverend Daoxian pondered for a long time. His eyes swept across, glanced at Shuiwe Master. Shuiwe Master seemed to sense something, frowned. Reverend Daoxian looked away, coughed once, looked at Li Sun who was still standing below. His face again revealed an amiable smile, smiled and said, "Nephew, before you came to Qingyun, did Yun Valley Master instruct you anything?" Li Sun hesitated for a moment, cupped his fists and said, "Respected teacher once instructed, Qingyun sect Reverend Daoxian is the current good faction's giant. Disciple came to Qingyun to pay respects to Reverend and wanted to have a good look, before returning to Fenxiang Valley. I will listen to Reverend's instructions." Reverend Daoxian was surprised and then laughed in spite of himself, said, "This teacher of yours is really sly, whatever difficult questions are thrown to me." Speaking, he paused for a moment and then nodded and said, "How about this? Your teacher also said in the letter, at most within 3 days, he will also lead Fenxiang Valley disciples to Central Plains. Most likely they will first reach our Qingyun Hill. Before that, you can temporarily stay at our Qingyun Hill for a few days." Li Sun was delighted, quickly said, "Yes, disciple obeys." Reverend Daoxian nodded slightly and then seemed to recall something, turned and spoke to Lu Sueki who was standing behind Shuiwe Master. "Sueki." Lu Sueki did not expect Reverend Daoxian to suddenly call her, was surprised and then stood up, bowed and said, "Sect head teacher uncle, disciple is here." Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, "You and Fenxiang Valley Li Sun's senior brother are considered old acquaintances. I remember these few years you have met many times. How about these few days? I will trouble you to bring him around Qingyun Hill. Don't lose the etiquette of hospitality." Lu Sueki frowned, turned and looked at her teacher Shuiwe Master, saw Shuiwe Master also frowning, her eyes looking at Reverend Daoxian. Reverend Daoxian looked back at her, his eyes filled with inquiry. Shuiwe Master sighed in her heart, spoke to Lu Sueki indifferently, "Since sect head teacher uncle has instructed, you are more familiar with him, bring him around." Lu Sueki's lips moved, slowly lowered her head, after a moment, quietly said, "Yes, disciple will obey teacher's command." Li Sun was overjoyed but maintained a smile on his face, said to Lu Sueki, "Thank you, junior sister." Lu Sueki nodded slightly but did not show any other expression. Reverend Daoxian smiled and nodded. Xing Shuchang, Tian Bui looked over but did not say anything. Instead, Tian Bai's wife Suru glanced over from her conversation with her daughter Tian Linger, frowned slightly. This gathering ended after a long while. Tian Bui brought his wife Suru, eldest disciple Xavian out of Tong Tian Peak Crystal Hall. Xavian followed his teacher out but could not help but secretly turned back to look. This action was seen by Tian Linger, who was walking out to send her father and mother, suddenly burst out laughing. Hearing the laughter, Tian Bui and Suru both turned back. Suru glanced at her daughter, smiled and said, "What are you laughing at?" Tian Linger walked to her mother's side, pulled Suru's hand, glanced sideways at big senior brother. Xavian felt guilty, immediately blushed. Tian Bui snorted, said, pretending to be mysterious, "What's wrong?" Tian Linger smiled and said, "Father, mother, both of you better quickly help big senior brother to go to Small Bamboo Valley, find Shuiwe teacher uncle to propose marriage, if not he will really be anxious to death." Tian Bui was surprised. Suru was far more quick-witted than her husband, reacted earlier, smiled and said to Xavian, "What, so you already have someone in your heart, and it is even my Shuiwe senior sister's Small Bamboo Valley disciple? Come, tell teacher wife, I will decide for you." Xavian opened his mouth to speak, unexpectedly glanced at Tian Bui, could not say anything and could only lower his head. Suru was startled, said, "What's wrong, Darren?" Tian Linger giggled, said, "Isn't big senior brother afraid that father will scold him? I will speak on his behalf." Xavian was a little nervous, opened his mouth and said, "Little junior sister." Tian Linger ignored him, spoke to Suru on her own, The one big senior brother has his eyes on is Shueihua teacher uncle's disciple Wen Min senior sister. Tian Bui snorted again. His expression was eccentric. Suru instead laughed out, said, "Good lad, at least you have some foresight. Wen Min, that girl is indeed not bad, but it is uncertain what her own thoughts are. I also cannot just." Xavian was anxious, raised his head and said, She is also the same." Before he finished, he saw his teacher, wife and little junior sister were all looking at him, their expressions like a smile yet not a smile. He was embarrassed and could not continue, could only lower his head again. Suru shook her head with a wry smile, said, forget it, you this fellow learned your teacher's foresight, why don't you learn his thick-skinned?" Tian Bui suddenly coughed at the side, glared over. Suru instead ignored him, said to Xavian, "Don't worry, leave this matter to me, teacher wife, as long as the girl is willing, your wish will be fulfilled." Chapter 271. Xavian was overjoyed, his face immediately beaming. Tian Bui snorted coldly, said, "Look at you!" Xavian was startled, quickly kept his smile, stood behind his teacher, but the smile on his face could not be concealed. Suru smiled and shook her head, pulled her daughter aside, urged her for a while, then came back, together with Tian Bui and Xavian, rode their swords and flew back to Bamboo Valley. Passing through the clouds and mist, as fast as lightning, after about an hour, the three of them returned to Bamboo Valley. Tian Bui did not speak after landing, walked straight to observe Silence Hall. Suru turned and said to Xavian, "You go and rest first, you don't have to worry about that matter." Xavian could not help but giggle again, quickly saluted, then strode back. Suru smiled and shook her head, slowly walked back to observe Silence Hall, saw Tian Bui sitting in the hall, walked over, smiled and said, "Hey, that eldest disciple you are so proud of, you have to go and propose to my Shueihua senior sister yourself." Tian Bui snorted, turned his head, said, "Want me to beg your senior sister humbly? I won't go." Suru was not angry, only smiled and said, "Then your eldest disciple wants to be a bachelor for life, I don't care." Tian Bui's face revealed a trace of disdain, looked up at the sky, said, "I also can't be bothered, anyway I am not going to be a bachelor for life." Suru could not help but burst out laughing again, stretched out her hand and lightly hit Tian Bui, said, "Really, don't you see how old you are, still so frivolous?" Tian Bui blinked his eyes, but still looked up at the sky, a heart of stone, not shedding tears when seeing the coffin, not turning back when kicked to Nanshan. Suru had no choice, could only say, "All right, to be serious, it is not easy for your disciple to find someone he likes, and besides, Wen Min, that lady is really not bad, I also like her. You only need to go to Bamboo Valley and talk to my Shueihua senior sister, with me by your side. At most you will only suffer some superficial gossip. What's that? Since Wen Min has some feelings for our Darren, my senior sister will not ruin her disciple's life just because of a little unhappiness with you." Tian Bui's face darkened for a long while, angrily said, "I knew boss is a good-for-nothing, really, actually fancied small Bamboo Heights people, making me at such an old age still have to suffer Shueihua, that damned woman's anger." Suru spat, said, "I am also from small Bamboo Valley. Why did you also fancy me? Look at you, now you still want to bring up old scores with me." Tian Bui was speechless for a moment, resentfully said, forget it, anyway I have already accepted my fate, a bunch of useless fellows, I will make a trip to small Bamboo Height. Suru then nodded and smiled, "That's more like it." After speaking, she put the matter aside, walked to the side, but after a few steps, suddenly stopped again. When she turned around, her brows slightly frowned, as if recalling something, said to Tian Bui, "Oh right, when you saw that Fenxiang Valley Li Sun today, did you feel something was wrong?" Tian Bui indifferently said, "You mean sect head senior brother let small Bamboo Valley Lu Sweki to receive him?" Suru nodded, said, "You also felt something was wrong?" Tian Bui snorted, said, "There is nothing wrong, if there is really a problem, that senior sister of yours would have coldly rejected, but you see she did not make any sound. It can be seen that at least sect head senior brother had told her about this, that senior sister of yours also agreed. Suru was surprised, then nodded, said, "Oh, you are right, I did not think of this, but senior sister had always doted on Lu Sweki, how could?" Tian Bui coldly said, "Is that Li Sun very bad, in her eyes? Most likely much better than our disciples." Suru was surprised, said, "Everything was fine, why did you talk about this?" Tian Bai's lips moved, casually said, "That year at East Sea Lubo Hill, that stormy night, I punished Lao Chi, she is not." When he spoke till here, he suddenly realized, stopped but for some reason, shook his head, sighed. Suru frowned, said, "The more you speak the stranger it is, you even dragged Xiao Fan into it, what is going on?" Tian Bui suddenly seemed to lose interest, shook his head and said, "Don't ask." Suru knew her husband's temper and kept quiet, just that this time her thoughts were suddenly stirred, couldn't help but sigh, said, "It has been 10 years, I wonder how Xiao Fan is now?" Tian Bui was silent for a long time, slowly stood up, coldly said, "Haven't you heard? He is now Ghost King's sect vice-head, changed his name to Ghostly, known as Shui Gongzi, very powerful." Suru lowered her head, slowly sat down on the chair beside. After a long time she quietly said, "Ai, that year when he first came to our sect, although he looked stupid but..." She did not continue. After a long time, softly said, "Originally such a good child, to you, to me, he was very respectful, but now... he ended up being expelled from the sect." A flash of anger flashed past Tian Bai's face, suddenly loudly said, "If they want to expel then so be it, I did not say to expel this disciple." Suru stood up at once, interrupted her husband's words, shouted, "Bui!" Tian Bui glanced at his wife, did not continue, but his expression became even more indignant, suddenly stamped his feet, with a heavy sound, strode to the back of observed silence hall. Suru silently looked at her husband's back figure, and then quietly sighed, turned and looked outside. Looking out from the observed silence hall's main door, the warm sunlight warmly shone on Big Bamboo Valley, in the distance, indistinctly the secluded kitchen, a corner of the eaves revealed behind the trees. The house was still there, but the person was gone. Suru quietly watched for a while, shook her head, turned and also walked into the observed silence hall's rear hall. The night gradually approached, the sky was filled with layers of dark clouds, pressing down very low, making it hard to breathe. Under such circumstances, no stars and no moon, at the foot of the barren mountain, only on a slope leeward from the wind, a bonfire was lit. Tanis Isien and the rest, along with the newly joined Ghostly and Monkey Xiao Hui, walked along the ancient path. This day they arrived at the foot of Kongsang Mountain. The sky was already dark. They started a bonfire at this leeward place and prepared to spend the night in the wilderness. Although he had been out for many years and was long used to these things, once Tanis Isien sat down, he still cried out in pain, continuously used his hands to hit his waist and back, as if his waist was about to break. Helplessly the rest ignored him. After crying for a while, unavoidably bored, he also slowly stopped. Xiao Huan squatted beside the bonfire, placed her hands on the fire to warm herself. Wild Dog Taoist put down Ghostly and the many packages, walked to the bonfire. This was the real panting. In the group, Xiao Hui was the most energetic. Once it landed on the ground, it looked around, jumping here and there. Ever since Xiao Huan decided to bring Ghostly away, for a very long time, Ghostly was like this and did not wake up. Occasionally he would wake up and look at the people around him, turned a blind eye, called Xiao Hui over, opened the wine bag on its back and kept drinking. After a while, he actually passed out drunk again, really leading a befuddled life. Along the way, Wild Dog Taoist, other than the packages, had another task of carrying Ghostly, and most of the time Xiao Hui would jump onto Ghostly's back, making him even heavier. If not for the fact that he had been practicing Taoism for some time, normal people would really not be able to withstand it. This time Wild Dog Taoist panted for a long time, looked around, Tanis Ka had been mumbling for a long time. He was probably tired and lay down beside with his clothes on. Xiao Huan was lying not far from the bonfire. As for the unconscious Ghostly, because Wild Dog Taoist had intentionally or unintentionally placed him at a further place, right now the firelight could not reach that place, only a blurry shadow could be seen, and that three-eyed monkey beside him, by now no one knew where. Most likely it had run off to find some wild fruits to eat. Along the way, Xiao Hui was often like this. Wild Dog sat quietly in front of the bonfire. The surroundings gradually quietened down. Tanis Ka's loud cries slowly sounded. Xiao Huan's body slightly moved up and down, seemed like she had also fallen asleep. The firelight reflected on Wild Dog's face, making his expression uncertain, also contrasting the strange glint in his eyes. After a long time, he suddenly raised his head, looked at that tall and precipitous in the night, the rocks towering like a night demon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws at Kongsang Mountain. That place was originally his Blood Forger Hall's sacred place. And right now, Blood Forger Hall had already turned into ashes, leaving only him, like a lonely wild ghost. He slowly turned back, that unconscious drunk man in the night shadows, lying motionless in the distance. Wild Dog Taoist breathed deeply. His hand subconsciously stretched to his waist, holding onto his beast Fong magical weapon. Then, he slowly got up, walked towards Ghostly. The firelight shone on his back, making his shadow longer and longer, gradually enveloping Ghostly lying on the ground. The next moment, he stood before Ghostly. Chapter 272. Gray light gently emitted from the edge of the cold beast tooth, brushed past Wild Dog Taoist's face. The man lying in front of him was the murderer who destroyed Blood Forger Hall with his own hands. His eyes glimmered, seemed to be fighting with some thoughts, just that this was a once-in-a-blue-moon opportunity. Usually what kind of person was Ghostly? Wild Dog Taoist did not even dare to think that he would be able to kill this man, but this time he seemed to have lost his will. It was a good opportunity to exact vengeance. A fierce glint flashed in Wild Dog Taoist's eyes. The beast tooth magical weapon struck down. The sound of the wind rustled. Suddenly a slight sharp piercing sound broke the silence of this late night. The magical weapon had yet to reach him. The wind had already blown onto that dispirited man. His messy hair scattered on his forehead was blown away, revealing his closed eyes' face. His face looked a little pale. Wild Dog Taoist suddenly had such a thought. In his entire life, he had never seen such a strange man like Ghostly. He also did not know what exactly was it that could make this man who looked extremely strong feel like he was dying. Just that, he also did not want to know. In his heart, Blood Forger Hall had always been a very important existence. This importance even far surpassed Nien Leader and the rest who were originally in charge of Blood Forger Hall. Therefore, after being forced into a desperate situation by Ghostly, Nien Leader and the rest succumbed, but only Wild Dog Taoist unexpectedly persisted. And now, it was a great opportunity for revenge. Wild Dog Taoist had already started to imagine the scene of blood spurting out, splashing onto his face. At that moment, he suddenly thought, if he killed this man, Xiao Huan behind him, would she be sad and upset? Maybe she would ignore me from now on. After all, between Xiao Huan and Ghostly, there was a past that Wild Dog Taoist did not know, but looking at Xiao Huan's insistence to bring Ghostly along to take care of him, he knew the relationship between them. Wild Dog Taoist did not know why. His mind was in a mess. In that moment, innumerable thoughts flashed past his mind. But that beast tooth, in the end, still pierced through the air. Watching, it was about to reach that dispirited man's throat, about to pierce in. A huge arm suddenly stretched out from the darkness. Noiselessly, like a ghost, suddenly appeared before Wild Dog Taoist. That enormous hand, before Wild Dog Taoist could react, abruptly grabbed Wild Dog Taoist's beast Fong weapon in his hand. The beast tooth's powerful force still pushed the huge hand down by a little, but it was only this little distance, after which, the entire beast tooth, like cast iron, was gripped by the huge hand, unable to move, stopped at Ghost Lee's throat, almost pierced through his neck. But no matter how Wild Dog Taoist tried to cast his spells, he was unable to go any further. Wild Dog Taoist turned pale with fright, looked up. The next moment he felt his blood turning cold. In the darkness above him, 3 balls of burning flames appeared, forming a triangle shape, especially that ball of flame at the top, indistinctly had a solemn golden color and a strange ferocious blood-red color. Wild Dog Taoist, even if he racked his brains, he could not understand why the golden color, which represented the subduing evil ability, and the blood-sucking red could be mixed together. But right now he knew, this monster in the darkness with just one hand could grab his beast tooth. This level of skills was definitely not something he could match. And in the surrounding shapeless darkness, suddenly there seemed to be a silent roar, like some strange beast roaring. In a blink the darkness charged up, looking like it was about to swallow him up. Wild Dog Taoist did not dare to stay any longer, almost subconsciously let go of the beast tooth magical weapon. With a turn he flew out. At that instant, a piercingly cold strong wind came down from above, smashed a huge pit where he was standing, made a deafening sound. The entire small hill seemed to shake. Far away, Tanis Ka and Xiao Huan were startled by the commotion at the same time, looked over and saw Wild Dog Taoist's body flew back, landed near the fire. After landing, he still could not stand steadily, staggered and retreated a few steps. And on his face, a terrified expression, his mouth hoarsely said, "Monster, monster." Tanis Ka and Xiao Huan looked back at the same time. The next moment their countenances also changed. In that darkness, at the place where Ghostly was lying, in the darkness, a huge figure slowly appeared, both feet on the ground, both arms over the knees. At a glance it was at least 4-5 zhongs tall, far taller than everyone there. They slowly looked up. In the end they could only look up. And at that highest point, 3 balls of burning flames were the monster's eyes. Huge and sharp fangs appeared in its mouth. Its muscular body, everywhere, seemed to be filled with murderous intent. Tanis Ka inhaled a breath of cold air, quietly said, "Three-eyed spirit." "No, it's three-eyed fierce monkey." Xiao Huan was surprised, said, "Grandpa, what did you say? Don't tell me it is Xiao Hui?" Tanis Ka snorted, pulled Xiao Huan and retreated. His mouth instead angrily said to Wild Dog Taoist, "What did you do? Want to anger this monster?" Wild Dog Taoist was silent. Tanis Ka saw him like this, became even more furious, was about to scold. Suddenly a roar was heard ahead. It was the three-eyed fierce monkey. Its huge body suddenly leapt up. The next moment the wind howled, a shadow shrouded over. Tanis Ka and the rest turned pale, fled in all directions, and Xiao Hui, who had transformed into a huge ape, seemed to be enraged by Wild Dog Taoist's attempt to harm its master. Its eyes glinted fiercely, attacked mercilessly. The 3 of them barely dodged. Xiao Hui's huge hand had already smashed down. With a bang, another large pit appeared on the thick ground. Even the bonfire at the side was immediately scattered by the huge force. The ashes from the fire flew all over the sky, illuminating Xiao Hui's huge body like a legendary demon. "Woo-ah!" The enraged huge beast roared, waved its right hand. A gray light flashed. Like the wind and lightning it charged towards Wild Dog Taoist. In a blink it was already in front of Wild Dog. Wild Dog Taoist felt a strong gust of wind hitting his face. Before it reached his body, the force almost tore his skin. In a great shock, he desperately dodged to the side. His body had just moved when he felt a pain on his back. That gray light brushed past his back. Wild Dog Taoist's body shook greatly, felt a strong force surging from behind, a sweet taste in his throat. A mouthful of blood was already spurted out. From the corner of his eyes, he saw that gray light. It was his own beast fang magical weapon. Without waiting for him to laugh bitterly, the huge ape's huge body suddenly appeared above him, crashing down. Wild Dog Taoist still wanted to avoid, but his body felt numb and could not move. He could only heave a long sigh, close his eyes and await death. Seeing that Xiao Hui was about to tear Wild Dog Taoist into pieces, its huge body crashing down from the sky, Tanis Ka and Xiao Huan stood stunned, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, Xiao Hui's body underwent a strange change. Its huge body suddenly tilted to the back and then, with a very strange and comical posture, with a plop, buttocks facing down, sat on the ground. Pung! This sitting was still full of vigor, awe-inspiring. Xiao Hui made a sound, obviously also bewildered. Its huge hand scratched its head, turned to look. Tanis Ka and Xiao Huan, and Wild Dog Taoist, who had luckily escaped, also looked over at the same time. Ghostly, who had awoken, suddenly appeared behind Xiao Hui, a desolate expression on his face. His right hand grabbed onto Xiao Hui's tail. Most likely it was him who at that critical moment pulled Xiao Hui down from the sky and saved Wild Dog Taoist's life. Xiao Hui's 3 eyes blinked, suddenly growled a few times at this man who was only half its height. Ghostly instead shook his head gently. Xiao Hui's body suddenly swayed. The next moment bones cracking sounds were heard. In front of Zhou Yixian and the rest's dumbstruck eyes, the huge ape suddenly shrunk. In a short while, the huge body again turned into that adorable 3-eyed monkey, looked around for a moment, with a sound scurried back to Ghostly's shoulder. Ghostly slowly stretched out his hand, stroked the monkey's head. Xiao Hui's 3 eyes rolled, looked like it was unwilling, called out twice, at the same time pointed at Wild Dog Taoist. Wild Dog Taoist was shocked but realized Ghostly was also looking at him, and then heard him saying, "You want to kill me?" Wild Dog Taoist's expression fluctuated, uncertain, and felt Xiao Huan's surprised gaze, but for some reason, under that gaze, he felt an indescribable sorrow. His mouth involuntarily shouted, "That's right, I want to kill you. You annihilated my blood forger hall, killed so many of my fellow disciples. Today I am avenging you, shouldn't I?" Ghostly did not speak, only coldly looked at him. Instead, Xiao Hui on his shoulder quietened down, made a sound like it was mocking Wild Dog. Wild Dog felt uneasy being stared at by Ghostly, and Xiao Huan's silence made him even more uneasy. Under the torture, he clenched his teeth, angrily said, "If you want to kill, then kill. What are you looking at?" Chapter 273. Ghostly slowly retracted his gaze from that outwardly fierce but inwardly cowardly Wild Dog. The expression on his face also gradually changed. Some desolation, some loneliness, some heartache, some pain. "Why would I kill you? If killing can save her, even if I have to kill everyone in the world, I would have done it long ago," he quietly muttered to himself, his voice light and fleeting. 10 years, other than killing, what else have I done? What exactly am I still alive for? His face desolate, his body slowly turned, ignoring the others, left alone. Wild Dog Taoist was stunned. Xiao Huan, who was standing beside him, suddenly changed her expression, actually ran after him. Tanis Yixian was shocked, quickly stretched out his hand to catch up, but unexpectedly he caught nothing. Xiao Huan jogged up to Ghostly, grabbed Ghostly's hand, said, "What happened to you? Where are you going?" When Ghostly was questioned by her, for a moment he felt the entire heaven and earth shook. Only those 4 words resounded. "Where are you going? Where are you going? Where are you going?" Where can I go?" This man suddenly lifted his head, looked up at the firmament. That pitch-black sky canopy, black and deep, endless, without a trace of light, the darkness that covered the sky and covered the earth, like covering the sky and covering the earth, rushed down, drowning his figure. Where should I go in the darkness?" a soft voice quietly asking. Southern border, 7-mile cave. A sorrowful atmosphere enveloped the entire valley. Numerous Miao people surged over from all directions, standing on both sides of the path that led to the altar halfway up the mountain, the elderly, children, strong men, women. In everyone's eyes, endless sorrow. Some of the women started to cry slowly. Very soon, choking sounds were heard from the crowd. Qing Long followed behind the Miao tribe leader Tu Magu, solemnly holding the small blue and white urn containing the ashes of the deceased great shaman, unhurriedly walked towards the altar. Pairs of eyes were all on that small blue and white urn. The young men clenched their fists, the women were crying, and the elderly's faces, only desolation. Tribe leader Tu Magu also remained silent, his face gloomy, but he was clearly more able to accept this fact than the other Miao people. Passing through the crowd, passing through the sorrowful gazes, the mountain breeze blew gently, brushing past the small urn. There seemed to be a soft sound, like singing, like gratification. This was their homeland. Qing Long was someone who had seen countless grand occasions, but at this moment, his face was solemn and respectful. Step by step behind tribe leader Tu Magu, walked to the altar halfway up the mountain. On the platform in front of the altar stood a circle of magi. The older ones had white hair, while the younger ones still had black hair. However, their eyes were filled with the same reverence. The sorcerer, who seemed to be the oldest, slowly walked up and bowed deeply to the azure dragon, saying a few words in the Miao language. Qing Long did not dare to be negligent and replied respectfully, just that he did not understand the southern border Miao language, so he turned and looked at the tribe leader Tu Magu. Tu Magu whispered, "This is the Aries shaman. He is now the leader of the shamans in the altar. He sends his regards to you and is extremely grateful that you have brought back the revered great shaman's remains." Qing Long solemnly said, "The great shaman is highly respected and has done his best for our Ghost King sect. What I have done is my duty." Tu Magu softly translated his words to the Aries shaman. The Aries shaman nodded his head, walked up to Qing Long and stretched out both of his hands. Qing Long solemnly handed the small urn in his hands to him. The Aries shaman solemnly received it. The moment he received it, the surrounding shamans suddenly broke the silence and started chanting a strange scripture in the Miao language, their voices indistinct, illusory and unreal, like the whispers of spirits, like the chill of the cold moon. The chanting gradually became louder, reverberated far away, reverberating in the mountains of the 7-mile cave. At the foot of the mountain, among the crowd, another cry was heard. The Aries shaman bowed to Qing Long and Tu Magu, turned and carried the small urn into the altar. The rest of the shamans followed behind. Qing Long watched all of this, his ears still reverberating with the sobbing sounds. He could not help but heaved a long sigh. Tu Magu's face dimmed, quietly said, "The entire Miao tribe, thank you, Honorable Envoy, for sending the great shaman back to his hometown." Qing Long solemnly said, "Tribe leader is too courteous. The great shaman has done great kindness to our Ghost King sect. Our reverence for the senior is not inferior to all of you. Our sect Ghost King actually wanted to personally escort the great shaman back, but unfortunately he really had something on and could not do it, specially entrusted me to apologize to all of you." Tu Magu nodded his head and said, "Ghost King Master is too courteous, I dare not accept it. Honorable Envoy, this way please." After speaking, he stretched out his hand and invited Qing Long to walk into the altar. Qing Long was surprised, secretly felt strange. He thought that the altar was an important place and not accessible to outsiders. Could it be that this tribe leader still had something to say to him? Just that, while he was thinking, his feet still walked over, as expected. Only Tu Magu accompanied Qing Long into the altar. The other Miao warriors behind him did not follow, and the group of shamans were nowhere to be seen. Most likely they had walked deeper into the altar. Seeing that there was no one around, Tu Magu stopped. Qing Long also stopped, looked at this Miao tribe leader, whose expression was complicated, quietly said, "Why, tribe leader, don't tell me there is something else?" Tu Magu hesitated for a moment, said, "I indeed have one more matter, would like to ask Honorable Envoy." Qing Long said, "Please speak." Tu Magu said, That young man who came to our Miao tribe's 7-mile cave and invited the great shaman over, I wonder how is he now? Qing Long was surprised. Ghost Li's figure flashed past his mind, after a moment of hesitation, said, "To be honest, tribe leader, that young man is our Ghost King sect vice head, but right now he is overwhelmed with grief. Very few people know where he went." Tu Magu's face revealed a disappointed expression, but then his face turned solemn. After a long silence, said, "Then I will have to trouble honorable envoy if you have the chance to meet him. Please pass on my words." Qing Long felt uneasy but still nodded and said, "Tribe leader, please speak." Tu Magu's eyes gazed into the dark depths of the altar. His voice also became erratic, said, "Please pass on, that day in the southern border 7-mile cave altar, an old man's request to him, hope he will remember it in his heart." Qing Long frowned. He was also an intelligent person. After hearing it once he knew most likely Ghostly had promised the Miao tribe something. That was why the great shaman decided to disregard everything to save Baiyao. A pity Ghostly was not here. If not, he would really want to ask, what was the matter that was so important? Thinking like that in his heart, Qing Long did not show it on his face, only solemnly nodded and said, "Tribe leader, don't worry, I will definitely pass it." Tu Magu sighed and was about to say something when suddenly outside the altar, a shrill whistle was heard from afar. The howl seemed to come from the horizon, uninterrupted, but the oppressive sound seemed to come from the 9 netherworlds, filled with murderous intent, in it an unfathomable ferocity, rolling over. In that instant, under this clear sky and bright sun, the entire 7-mile cave mountains were filled with ghostly cries, innumerable ferocious beasts roaring and roaring. The sounds shook the valleys, thunders rumbled, like huge waves of the sea, swallowing this small island of 7-mile cave. Tu Magu's countenance suddenly changed, even Qing Long's countenance also changed slightly. Both of them dashed out of the altar at the same time. The sky above the 7-mile cave, the original azure blue sky, had already been covered by the dark clouds. The ear-piercing howl was still rumbling unceasingly. The dark clouds rolled over and over. The Miao people at the foot of the mountain were panic-stricken. Children, women and children were screaming loudly. Gusts of wind coldly blew out from the dark clouds in the sky, like a proud demon, grinning hideously at the ground. The galloping footsteps finally neared. The first enormous figure appeared on the distant mountaintop. The white bones were particularly dazzling under the black clouds, but the 3 pairs of colorful wings on its back were strangely beautiful. However, such beautiful wings were growing on the body of a giant snake that only had white bones left except for its head. It looked especially terrifying. A close to 3 zhang long white-boned snake flapped the 3 pairs of wings on its back. The tongue on the snake's head kept on flicking in and out, spitting out waves of black gas. The next moment, from behind this white-boned snake, beside it, even the undulating mountain ranges, on the surrounding valleys and peaks of the 7-mile cave, in the endless ghostly cries, numerous strange demonic beasts and races surged out, shrieking, grinning hideously, brandishing their weapons and claws, charged down from the mountain, pouncing into this valley, towards the terrified people. And at this moment, in the horizon, in the whistling of the wind, suddenly a thunderclap exploded. The rumbling, deafening sound, like waves rolling over and over, shook the heaven and earth, mixed with that indistinct roar, Linglong. Chapter 274. Qin Yun Hill, Tong Tian Peak, Founder's Ancestral Hall. That old man guarding the ancestral hall right now was still holding his broken broom, standing at the entrance of the hall, looking out. His wrinkled face faintly revealed a strange expression. It seemed to be a little expectant, but also a little excited. The empty space outside the hall, not a soul in sight, but if one looked carefully, one would discover that around this empty space, there were many more strange talismans than usual, either stuck on the surrounding tree trunks or hidden under the bushes and stones. Each talisman paper was about half a zhang apart, seemingly unconnected but in fact indistinctly formed a mysterious formation, isolating this empty space from the surroundings. The warm sunlight shone down from the sky. Inside and outside the formation, there was no difference at all, the same place was bathed in the sunlight. Just that the next moment, suddenly a sharp sound was heard, from above that empty space. The old man standing at the entrance of the Founder's ancestral hall looked up, the hand that was holding the broom, subconsciously tightened. A strange darkness suddenly appeared above this empty space, in a blink shrouded the sky above the empty space, instantly tainted the surroundings with a heavy austere atmosphere. However, this darkness only existed in this empty space. To be more precise, it existed in the formation formed by the surrounding talismans. It was obvious that this strange formation was set up by an expert to bind this power within. The black gas in the air became thicker and thicker, making one feel as if one was in the 9 levels of hell. But the next moment, suddenly a dragon's long roar was heard. From the black gas, bluish-green light flashed, abruptly burst out from the black gas. In a blink of an eye the radiance was boundless, driving away the black gas. Lin Jingyu held the dragon-slaying celestial sword in his hand, and appeared high up in the air. Azure light emitted from his body, extremely dazzling. His eyes were bright and piercing, man and sword as one, suddenly pounced down from the sky. The dragon slayer's sword carried thousands of rays of light, made a loud roar, its imposing manner was unfathomable, still far up in the air but the ground was already filled with dust, sand and stones flying away. And following Lin Jingyu's body like lightning, the sides of his body also seemed to be ignited in flames because of his speed and ferocious momentum. He looked like a god of war, disregarding everything, full of fighting spirit, flying down. The ancestral hall old man's lips suddenly started to tremble. Boom! A loud rumbling sound could be heard in the blink of an eye. The ground that was hit by the mystical power of the true technique let out a painful groan. In an instant, the surface of the ground within the array was torn apart. Rocks of all sizes actually left the ground and shot up into the sky. And the dazzling bluish-green light ball in the middle of that power had already pierced deep into the ground. And the dazzling bluish-green light ball in the middle of that power had already pierced deep into the ground. The faint sound of a mysterious incantation could be heard in the air, and an invisible force spread out, enveloping this massive destructive force, preventing it from leaking out. Outside the spirit formation, the sun was warm and the grass and trees were leisurely growing. But inside the spirit formation, the sky and earth were turned upside down like a violent storm. This was the mystical scene outside Qing Yun Hill Founder's Masters. In the distance, a dark green figure was watching from afar. He stood motionlessly with his hands behind his back. The storm in the formation gradually calmed down. The sand and dust that had been blown into the sky by the huge force fell back down. The cracks on the ground and the huge deep hole still recorded the earth-shattering blow just now. Standing at the entrance of the Founder's ancestral hall, the corners of the old man's mouth twitched, finally revealing a trace of a smile. In the depths of his eyes, there seemed to be a deep sense of gratification. After a whistling sound, Lin Jingyu leaped out of the deep pit with the dragon slayer sword in his hand. His body was covered with dust, and even his handsome face was stained with some dust. As soon as his body landed on the ground, he immediately started to pant heavily. However, his face was still filled with excitement. He raised his head and looked at the old man standing at the entrance of the ancestral hall. There was a hint of a smile on the corner of the old man's mouth. He slowly raised his hand and gently waved at him. Lin Jingyu caught his breath and walked quickly to the old man's side, calling out, "Senior, The old man smiled and nodded. His eyes were full of gratification and love as he looked at him. He said in a low voice, "You're good, really good." Speaking, he slowly raised his head and looked at the sky. He leisurely said, "Even if it was me at that time, mastering this slay ghost deity, true way sword formula, I was not much faster than you. Lin Jingyu, with a sound, sheathed the dragon slayer sword into its sheath. The excitement on his face had not faded. He said, Senior, if not for your guidance, I really don't know when I would be able to master this kind of unique true way. That old man snorted. His face revealed a trace of disdain. He faintly said, Today in Qin Yun sect, other than Daoxian, only Tian Bui and your previous teacher Vasp Kalo are still acceptable. The other elders are all good-for-nothings. Bei was startled. He had been learning from this mysterious old man in the ancestral hall for more than 10 years. Over the years, as his cultivation deepened, his respect and admiration for this old man deepened. He really felt that this old man had opened up a new world for him that he had never known before. Turned out that cultivation could also be done in this way. And as Lin Jingyu spent more time with this old man, the old man began to love him more and more. They talked more and more. Naturally, it involved some of the people in the world. At this moment, the old man's tone was unexpectedly arrogant. It was as if in the world, there were not many people who could enter his eyes. In the beginning, although Bei did not dare to refute, but in his heart he was not convinced. But as his cultivation deepened, he felt more and more that this old man was really unfathomable, felt even more that he was so arrogant. Naturally he had his reasons. With his skills, how many people in the world would be able to catch his eye? But he always disliked that fat bamboo peak Shirshu Tian Bui. Perhaps it was because he saw Tian Bui scolding Sha Danan. He could not help but said, Senior, I think that Tian Bui is very sloppy and ordinary. What is so great about him? The old man glanced at him, shook his head and said, What do you know, Tian Belize looks ordinary, but in cultivation, he has a special talent, and his character is persistent, far beyond ordinary people. This point is especially important after the cultivation deepens. When he entered the sect, he was always mediocre. Once he was enlightened, his cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. His achievement was even above those lively Shixiang and Shiji who looked down on him. He snorted coldly again, said, In this world, 8 or 9 out of 10 people are mediocre. Like Tianyun, Shang Zhengliang, a bunch of trash, what do they know? Lin Jingyu was silent but looking at the old man's arrogant expression. His words even belittled Taoist Tianyun and the rest of the Qin Yun heads whose names shook the world back then as trash. If this was spread out, it would be a world-shocking joke, but for some reason, Lin Jingyu right now did not even have the slightest doubt. The old man turned his head and looked at Lin Jingyu, said, Although you can use this style, slay ghost deity, but this style of sword incantation is fierce and extreme yang. Although the power is great, it also consumes a lot of your body's energy. You are talented and can already practice this at such a young age. But you still need to continue practicing to be able to use it freely. Unless it is a critical moment, it is better not to use this sword incantation. Lin Jingyu knelt down in front of him, respectfully said, Yes, disciple understands. The old man helped him up, assessed him with a few glances, a trace of arrogance flashed past his face, said, In this world, Jadian people only know that celestial sword-wield thunder true formula is our Jadian's supreme true way. Actually, what kind of person was our sect's Qin Yi founder? He sorted out the skills passed down by the predecessors and also with his own understanding from the nameless ancient scroll, passed down a total of 4 styles of sword incantation. Which one of them is not a supreme true way with unparalleled power? What? Lin Jingyu was shocked, said, There is such a thing, my teacher he had never told me before. The old man shook his head slightly, said, Your teacher also does not know. Lin Jingyu's shock was no small matter. At that time Taoist Song Song's status in Jadian sect was just below 1 person and above tens of thousands. But this old man actually said that even he did not know. But in fact Taoist Song Song indeed did not tell him. towards this old man's identity and background, Lin Jingyu couldn't help but feel even more curious. That old man's eyes, which were filled with vicissitudes of life and experience, only needed to look at his face for a moment before he knew what this young man was thinking. However, he did not expose him. Instead, he suddenly frowned and seemed to have sensed something. His eyes suddenly looked into the distance. After a moment, he retracted his gaze, his expression a little strange, and then faintly said, "It is getting late, you go back first." Lin Jingyu was really reluctant, but he had always revered this old man like a deity and did not dare to disobey him. He respectfully knelt down and kowtowed 3 times before turning to leave. Not long after, only that old man was left. He was silent for a long time, his body resumed its stooped appearance, hobbled to one side, the broom danced, dust rose. At the same time as sweeping up the stones and dust, those mysterious talismans hidden in the secret places were also swept up by him as if they were weightless, drifted into the dust. After tidying up that piece of empty land, he randomly filled those stones into the huge pit that Lin Jingyu had made, barely filling it up. This old man seemed to be panting and tired, stood and rested for a while before he slowly turned around and walked back into the founder's ancestral hall. In the ancestral hall, it was still as quiet and dim as usual. In the depths of the hall, before the innumerable memorial tablets, little by little flickering candles silently burned. Chapter 275. Just that at this moment, there was another figure, standing in front of those memorial tablets, standing tall. That person in a dark green Taoist robe, with a sage-like demeanor, it was the current Qing Yun sect head Reverend Daoxian. Reverend Daoxian heard the footsteps, turned and glanced at the old man but did not say anything, and then turned to look at those memorial tablets, and then stepped forward, picked up 3 thin incense sticks from the sacrificial table in front of the tablets, lit them on the candles beside, respectfully held the incense sticks, bowed 3 times, inserted the incense sticks into the incense burner. "I have not come to offer incense for a period of time." Reverend Daoxian's voice was calm and slow, as if speaking to a very, very old friend. "Don't know if the ancestors will blame me." The old man standing behind him walked up shakily, leaned the broom aside, picked up a rag, gently wiped the ashes on the sacrificial table, quietly said, "You have made our Qing Yun sect so lively, the ancestors can't wait to be happy. Why would they blame you?" Reverend Daoxian smiled faintly, turned to look at him, suddenly said, "You seem to have aged a few more years." The old man paused for a moment and then continued to wipe the table, without turning his head, said, "Even the heart is dead, naturally will age faster." Reverend Daoxian silently looked at the old man, did not speak again. The old man slowly and carefully finished wiping the sacrificial table, placed the rag aside, turned to face Reverend Daoxian, looked at him for a while, suddenly said, "You have seen it all just now?" Reverend Daoxian silently nodded, sighed and said, "That child's aptitude is indeed very high, but," his voice seemed to be a little louder, "I did not expect you would pass slay ghost deity to him." That old man snorted, said, "This child's temperament and aptitude are all good. Since it is so, why not pass it on? Don't tell me like you, hide it in your body and bring it to the coffin after death?" Reverend Daoxian's countenance changed, as if angry, but for some reason, facing this old man, he as the world's revered leader of the good faction, even such sarcastic words, his countenance only changed for a moment and then he held it in. "Oh right, there is one more thing I need to tell you," Reverend Daoxian indifferently said. The old man raised his head and said, "I'm just an old man with 1 foot in the grave, what's the matter?" Reverend Daoxian said, "It will be today, later on, Fenxiang Valley Master Yun Ilan will lead his disciples and come to Qing Yun Hill for a visit." The old man suddenly frowned and said, "Yun Ilan?" Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, "You still remember him?" The old man sneered and turned his head. His voice suddenly became somewhat meaningful as he said, That person is a crafty old fox, southern border, 7-mile cave mountain range. This was an undulating mountain range, with the 7-mile cave as the center, extending in all directions. These mountains had always been a place with lush forests and green hills and clear waters, but now they had completely lost their original appearance. An icy cold wind descended from the sky, whistling through the mountains like the cries of ghosts. The sky was filled with black clouds, pressing very low, a little like when the Lee tribe invaded the 7-mile cave, but the power was far from that day. And in the forest, which was originally filled with various kinds of birds and beasts, right now it had completely turned into hell on earth. All kinds of strange beasts were everywhere, the corpses of birds and beasts were massacred, a stench of blood. Following a long howl, a clear figure flew over from afar. In a few leaps it was before them. It was Qing Long. His face was grim, his clothes already stained with blood. A strong wind brushed past. He stopped on a horizontal branch, looked around anxiously, and then looked behind him. Between the originally peaceful forest trees, suddenly an ear-piercing long howl was heard, where it flapped its wings loudly. That enormous white-boned snake suddenly soared into the sky. Its 2 huge eyes immediately reflected Qing Long's figure, with a loud roar, pounced over. And immediately behind it, black smoke billowed, waves of roars like waves, innumerable demonic beasts swarmed over, pouncing towards Qing Long. Not long ago, the 7-mile cave Miao people's residential area was suddenly surrounded by innumerable demonic beasts. Leading them was this extremely terrifying demonic white-boned snake. This white-boned snake's body was huge. Wherever it passed by, white bones danced, humans and beasts were thrown out, and it could even spit out poisonous gas. Those who were hit would die immediately. As for the other ordinary demonic beasts, they were also extremely powerful and extremely cruel. Although the Miao people were brave, but how would they be these demonic beasts' match? In a blink the 7-mile cave became hell on earth, a slaughterhouse. Qing Long saw that the situation was not good, made a prompt decision, let the Miao tribe leader Tu Ma Gu to withdraw the remaining Miao people into the altar. Those shamans in the altar still knew some southern border shaman skills and could resist for a while, and he dashed forward, caught the white-boned snake unawares, at the same time using his swift movements to deal heavy blows, killing and injuring the demonic beasts. As expected, he attracted most of the demonic beasts' attention to himself. Just that other demonic beasts were still all right, but that white-boned snake was not to be underestimated. With Qing Long's level of skills, in addition to his rare treasure, Ring of Universe Clear Light, he actually could not win. And the surrounding demonic beasts gathered more and more. Qing Long's pressure also increased. While he was shocked, he also had the intention to lure these demonic beasts away, so he fled up the mountain. As expected, many demonic beasts, including the white-boned snake, were lured over. Just that since he wanted to lure the demonic beasts away, he was unwilling to fly up and only skimmed over the forest ground, but unexpectedly, it seemed that the wild beasts and birds all over the mountain had undergone a strange transformation. Either they were killed or they turned into extremely aggressive demonic beasts. Wherever they went, they would appear and would be attacked. It was really difficult to deal with. At this moment, the azure dragon once again flew up, dodging the enraged white-boned demon snake's huge tail strike, but saw 3 or 4 huge trees that had lived for who knows how many years were swept aside by this demon beast as if they were dry weeds and rotten wood, making a clattering noise. Along the way, it directly smashed into many of the smaller demonic beasts, causing wails to ring out in all directions. The white-boned snake saw Qing Long flying up. Its snake head looked up to the sky, with a furious roar. Suddenly its 3 pairs of wings flapped. Its huge body actually flew up, pouncing towards Qing Long in the air. Qing Long was shocked, although he saw from the start that this demonic beast had 3 pairs of wings, but when such a huge body really flew up, the power was really shocking. For a moment that huge body blotted out the sky and covered the earth as it pounced down. But Qing Long was after all not an ordinary human. He was ranked first among the 4 holy envoys of Ghost King's sect. Naturally he had his outstanding points. His body twisted and forcefully passed through the gaps of the white-boned snake's body, flying in the opposite direction of the 7-mile cave. The white-boned snake hissed again and again, flapped its wings and pursued. Qing Long flew for a while. His skills were after all profound. Gradually he left the snake and the other demonic beasts far behind, looking at the distance. He was thinking if he should shake off these monsters and return to the 7-mile cave to see how the Miao people were doing. Just at this moment, he suddenly glanced out of the corner of his eyes, saw a purple light flashed past in the forest below him, and then blood-splattered, demonic beast roars rose and fell. Immediately the demonic beasts from all directions rushed towards the place below him. Looking from the sky, numerous ferocious demonic beasts bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they pounced over, like an endless evil sea surging and surging. It was really hair-raising. And among them, a woman's angry shout was mixed in. Qing Long's heart was moved, a few thoughts flashed past his mind like lightning. Eventually he still turned back and went forward to investigate. Upon entering the forest, he could only smell the stench of blood. Everywhere were demonic beast corpses, lying on the ground in pieces, blood splattered everywhere. Not far away, there was indeed a person who looked like a woman fighting with innumerable demonic beasts. In her hand was a shining purple magical weapon, its sharp edge swallowing and spitting. One look and one could tell it was not an ordinary item. Qing Long's eyes shrunk hoarsely said, "Purple light blade. You are Jean Pinger?" That woman seemed to be shocked too, turned back and looked. Her body floated over but her hands did not stop. Where the purple light flashed, another 3 demonic beasts were killed. "Who are you?" Jean Pinger landed beside Qing Long, coldly asked. Qing Long felt puzzled. With Jean Pinger's current cultivation, why did she not fly up? Once she reached the sky, only a few of these demonic beasts could fly up. Wouldn't that be simple? Although he thought so, but Qing Long was still prepared to answer. Just that before he could speak, both him and Jean Pinger's bodies shook at the same time, as if sensing something. They looked up together. Just a moment ago the innumerable demonic beasts were still in a frenzied state. Suddenly, like the tide retreated, but deep in the forest ahead of them, a gush of cold murderous intent surged over. This formless murderous intent was so cold that even these 2 highly skilled figures could not help but shivered. Qing Long was aghast. In the southern border, there was actually such a terrible thing. Just when they were shocked, the next moment, behind a huge tree ahead, a figure suddenly flashed. A person slowly walked out. That person was dressed in bright-colored silk clothes, a head of black hair scattered over his shoulders, both hands slender and white, his looks even more handsome. He was actually a pretty to the point of almost seductive youth. Azure Dragon was dumbfounded, but almost at the same time, he suddenly felt that Jean Pinger's body, for some reason, was trembling slightly after the appearance of this young man. Chapter 276. The forest gradually quietened down. The ferocious demonic beasts a moment ago, for some reason, had dispersed far away. The speed was so fast that Qing Long was taken aback. Just that in his heart, Jean Pinger's reaction when she saw this strange young man was even more unfathomable to him. That young man's eyes slowly landed on both of them, carefully assessed them, seemed to frown slightly, said, "Both of you are Central Plains people, right?" This young man spoke in a gentle and pleasant and very pure Central Plains language. Qing Long was startled for a moment, asked in reply, "Who are you?" The young man smiled faintly, revealing 2 rows of white teeth. He looked a little naive, completely out of place in the bloody scene around him. He smiled and said, "Who am I?" "This question is a good one," he slowly said. "Who am I?" Qing Long snorted, suppressed his voice and said, "I am Ghost King Sect Qing Long. Who is this person?" Jean Pinger was shocked. Obviously she also knew of Qing Long's name. The evil sect's three big branches had always been fighting fiercely, Jean Pinger as He-Huan sect's new generation outstanding disciple, although she had never seen Qing Long, but the information of this important figure in Ghost King sect was already very familiar to her. She nodded slightly, considered as a greeting. Originally from their standpoint, they should be enemies and not friends, just that right now in this southern border foreign land, demonic beasts rampaging, both of them could not help but treat each other as comrades in arms. Jean Pinger glanced at that young man, quietly said, "Be careful. He is the demon beast, all of the surrounding demonic beasts are his subordinates. His skills are very high." She paused and softly added, "His skills are also very strange." Qing Long frowned, was about to ask a few more questions when suddenly a roar was heard from behind, following which sounds of trees falling were heard incessantly. Both of them quickly turned to look, saw that white-boned snake demon charging straight over, just that there were no other small demons beside it. Most likely they were the same as the other demonic beasts, intimidated by the demon beast's appearance and dared not come near. Azure Dragon did not expect the white-boned snake demon to catch up so quickly. Seeing that the snake demon was in front of him in the blink of an eye, accompanied by a gust of wind, a white shadow flashed and the huge body of the snake demon swept over. The large trees that had grown for many years were swept away like grass in front of these monsters. They were uprooted and flew toward them with loud booms. Qing Long and Jean Pinger leapt up at the same time. Both of them were not ordinary people. With one look they could tell that this white-boned demon snake was not an ordinary demon, it was filled with evil energy. Clearly its skills were not low. But more importantly, the mysterious youth in front of them hadn't made a move since the beginning, and the two of them couldn't see through him no matter how hard they tried. Forget about Qing Long, he was only secretly fearful, but that Jean Pinger seemed to know more than Qing Long. She was extremely nervous. Even when she was facing the white-boned snake demon, half of her thoughts were still on her back. Jean Pinger's state, naturally could not escape the experienced Qing Long's eyes. At this moment, the two of them did not engage in direct combat with the white-boned demon snake. Instead, they relied on their agility to chase and fly around the white-boned demon snake. Occasionally, they would take the opportunity to attack the white-boned demon snake. However, the body of the demon snake seemed to be extremely tough. Ordinary magical treasures and Dao techniques could not harm it. And unable to catch up with Qing Long and Jean Pinger, that white-boned snake demon roared again and again. Its huge body kept twisting and turning. Its speed also became faster and faster, without the slightest bit of clumsiness, gradually catching up with the two of them. Qing Long was shocked. This white-boned snake demon was already so difficult to deal with. The youth behind them, whom Jean Pinger called the demon beast, was the leader of these monsters. Wouldn't it be even more terrifying? With this thought, he had the intention to leave. While flying past Jean Pinger, he urgently said, "Quickly go." Jean Pinger obviously did not want to stay here for long, immediately nodded and at the same time pointed to the sky. Qing Long understood. Almost at the same time, both of them gave a light shout. A clear light from Qing Long's hand mixed with Jean Pinger's purple light, hit the white-boned snake demon's spine from the side. Even though the white-boned snake demon's bones were tough and thick, it was also hit backwards by these two experts. The snake's body was soft. After a few shakes, the force dissipated, but in the end it was already suppressed and unable to pursue. Qing Long took advantage of this gap, with a light whistle, soared up, but the moment his body flew up, he suddenly had a thought, glanced to the side from the corner of his eyes, and indeed did not see Jean Pinger flying up. Ho-ah! Just as Azure Dragon was feeling bewildered, the originally clear sky in front of him suddenly darkened. A black curtain suddenly appeared above the branch he had just flown out of, and a force that could topple the mountains and overturn the seas came crashing down. At that critical moment, the Azure Dragon was on guard. The ring of universe clear light on his right hand shone brightly, instantly forming a ball of light that protected his entire body. At the same time, his body forcefully moved to the side. But even so, that patch of darkness pounced down at an unimaginable speed. A loud sound, Qing Long's protective halo was still hit by the great force and immediately flew out. And at the same time, Qing Long clearly saw Jean Pinger turned into a purple light, flew up to the sky from behind that patch of darkness. From afar, he could still hear her gentle laughter. "Thank you, uncle. In future, if we are fated, I will thank you in person." Qing Long suppressed the surging blood in his chest, a bitter smile on his lips. He had been unhindered all his life, and in his old age, he was actually schemed against by a young lady. Just that at this moment, how could he care about Jean Pinger? He stretched out his hand and grabbed onto a big tree trunk. A sound, his palm sank deeply into the wood. His body then made a turn and landed. And the next moment, the white-boned snake demon had already caught up with him, like a tiger eyeing its prey, but it did not immediately rush up. A huge snake head flicked its tongue, hissing. As for that patch of darkness, it landed on the ground, a sound and disappeared. The speed was so fast, it was really rare. And that seductive young man, like a ghost, appeared one zhang away from Qing Long, his hands clasped behind his back. Qing Long landed on the ground, heaved a long sigh. He was intercepted, but right now he was not in a hurry to escape, only frowning slightly, glanced at that young man, suddenly said, "That evil thing in the sky just now, is it the legendary Taotai?" That young man raised his eyebrows, revealed a smile on his lips, nodded and said, "Did not expect you to have some foresight. That's right, it is Taotai." "Ho-ah!" Following the young man's words, this time the strange sound was soft and deep, coming from behind the young man. The next moment, an extremely hideous strange head slowly peeked out from behind the young man's figure. It was hard to tell what kind of animal this strange head was, but it had 4 eyes that were as thick as a copper bell, and 2 pairs of them were on either side of its face. 6 sharp fangs were exposed from its big mouth, and saliva was constantly dripping from its mouth. On its grayish-black skin, there were lumps of thick hard lumps. Even the most ferocious ghost in the mortal world's legends, most likely would not be as hideous as this strange beast. Qing Long inhaled a breath of cold air. The Taotai's neck seemed to be extremely long. That strange head stretched out a lot from behind the young man, turned around and actually wound around to the young man's shoulder, and that young man in front of such a ferocious strange beast. His expression was calm and composed. Qing Long composed himself, slowly said, "Did not expect that in this world there is still such a ferocious beast existing." That young man smiled, stretched out his hand and actually stroked the Taotai's head. That Taotai looked extremely ferocious, but under the young man's palm, it only growled softly and even used its head to rub against the young man's hand. If not for its ferocious appearance, it would almost look like a little puppy. That young man glanced at Qing Long, suddenly said, "That lady just now is your companion. She knew that the Taotai was hiding in the air but deliberately made you the bait. After luring the Taotai down, she escaped by herself. Right now you must be very angry in your heart?" Qing Long was secretly on his guard, but his mouth still smiled and said, "Being tricked by her, it is my own incompetence, cannot blame others." That young man took another look at him, nodded and said, "Since it is so, then you shall die." His voice had yet to fade, and he did not seem to make any movement, but the white-boned snake, which had been eyeing Qing Long like a tiger behind him, suddenly as if it had received an order, opened its huge mouth and bit down. Qing Long had been on high alert, although the white-boned snake suddenly attacked, but he did not panic. Instead of retreating, he advanced and directly charged towards the snake, giving that snake a fright. Taking advantage of the moment when the snake was stunned, Qing Long had already dashed below the snake. His body flashed and avoided the venomous gas that the enraged snake spat out. His feet kicked the snake's white bones, forcefully kicking the snake's huge body forward by 3 chi and at the same time borrowing the force. He soared up and a clear light lit up in his hands, instantly laying 6 light walls in the direction of the Taotai. Among the 2 beasts and 1 human, the one he feared the most, was still that young man who had not made a move yet. The white-boned snake roared again and again, but it was already too late. Qing Long was about to fly up to the sky and escape from the trap. Suddenly his legs tightened. His body, which was soaring up, was caught by a hand. The next moment, a low, deep laughter was heard from below. A great force came from that hand. Qing Long only felt as if his body was on fire. His body shook violently. His body was involuntarily flung out by that hand. In the mid-air, his body was seen drifting, accompanied by the sound of branches breaking and snapping. Qing Long's body was once again flung into the forest. In the forest, once again the roars of innumerable evil beasts were heard. In the mid-air, that young man closed his eyes slightly, looked up at the sky. A breeze blew past, blowing his brightly colored silk clothes, fluttering in the wind. In the distance there seemed to be ferocious beasts roaring to Qing Yun Hill, Tong Tian Peak, Crystal Hall. Qing Yun sect from sect head Reverend Daoxian down, each branch leaders gathered in the hall, and there were also many elders standing behind the leaders, a rare sight standing at the entrance of Crystal Hall. Looking at them, it seemed like they were waiting for someone. No matter who it was, to be able to receive such courtesy from Qing Yun sect, it was already the world's #1 figure. Other than the Qing Yun sect people, Li Sun also stood below, quietly and respectfully, just that his eyes indistinctly revealed an agitated expression, his gaze occasionally glancing to the other side. There, Anan, dressed in white, was standing behind Shueiyue Master with an indifferent expression. Not long after, a melodious bell sound was heard from the distant Qing Yun Hill, rang 5 times in succession. Everyone present looked towards the outside of the hall. From afar, a voice was heard. Fenxiang Valley Master, Yun Elan, Mr. Yun. Paying a visit almost at the same time, a flame-like figure appeared at the entrance of Crystal Hall. He, where is Daoxian's senior brother? Junior brother misses you to death. Chapter 277. Dressed in red, full of smiles, Yun Elan strode in. Behind him followed Shangguan Su, Lu Shun, and a group of Fenxiang Valley elders and disciples. Looking at the number of people, there were more than 10 of them. The Qing Yun sect people made a slight sound of bewilderment, but the next moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Yun Elan's face. This renowned figure of the world's good faction for many years was also an all-powerful character. Most of the older Qing Yun sect elders present had seen this person before, but right now in everyone's eyes there was only astonishment. This man, who looked vaguely similar but was clearly only in his prime, was he really that Yun Elan whose hair and beard had already turned white decades ago? Reverend Daoxian carefully assessed Yun Elan, walked forward, smiled and said, "Yun patron, you and I have not met for many years. Unexpectedly your skills have improved greatly. You have already comprehended Jade Sun Realm from Fenxiang Jade Book, a pioneer in Fenxiang Valley for 800 years. Congratulations." Yun Elan's smiling face suddenly stiffened. A trace of surprise flashed past his eyes, but his expression had already returned to normal. Said, "Daoxian's senior brother really has good eyesight. Respect, respect." Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, "Not at all, not at all. It should be me who admire you." Yun Elan looked at him. Reverend Daoxian smiled and looked at each other. The next moment both of them looked at each other and laughed. Li Sun walked up, knelt down and bowed, said, "Teacher, disciple has been waiting here for a long time." Yun Elan nodded, smiled and said, "Get up, you have been here for a few days. Have you comprehended the wonders of Qing Yun Hill, this paradise on earth?" Li Sun stood up, respectfully said, "Qing Yun Hill really lives up to its reputation. Disciple has really broadened my horizons, and also I have to thank Daoxian teacher uncle and—" He paused, loudly said, "and Small Bamboo Valley Lu Sweki Lu junior sister, for bringing me to experience this paradise." The Qing Yun sect crowd immediately, a buzz, sound, discussion started. Other than the elders, there were also many younger generation disciples. Numerous gazes immediately looked towards that cold lady. The corners of Lu Sweki's mouth twitched, but his expression remained indifferent. In the end, he did not say anything. Reverend Daoxian smiled, pulled Yun Elon's hand and said, "Yun Valley Master has such a good disciple, you have a successor, come, please take a seat." Yun Elon bowed and said, "Sage, please." Both of them looked at each other and smiled, walked up together. Reverend Daoxian and Yun Elon sat together at the main seat. On both sides were their own sect members. After a round of pleasantries, Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, "Fenxiang Valley is the world's great good faction. Everyone in the world respects us. Yun Valley Master actually graces us with your presence. It really brings light to Qin Yun's sect." Yun Elon shook his head repeatedly, said, "Reverend is too kind, too kind." While speaking, his expression suddenly turned serious, solemnly said, "Actually, this time I am here to pay a visit. There are two important matters that I would like to request from Qin Yun's sect." Reverend Daoxian hurriedly said, "Valley Master Yun is too courteous, please speak your mind." Yun Elon coughed once, said, "To be honest, this first matter is related to a great calamity rarely seen in these few hundred years." The Qin Yun sect people were immediately moved. Tian Bui, who was sitting below Reverend Daoxian, frowned, said, "Yun Valley Master, what do you mean?" Yun Elon sighed, said, "Everyone may not know, just a month ago, in the southern border 10,000 great mountains that our valley has guarded for generations, a peerless evil demon has been revived." Reverend Daoxian was stunned, said, "Peerless evil demon?" Yun Elon nodded and said, "That's right, it is a peerless evil demon. Everyone is far away in Central Plains and do not know the details, but our Fenxiang Valley has guarded the southern border for generations, so we know the details. This evil demon calls himself Beast Deity, an ancient evildoer. We do not know where he came from, only know that back then he brought disaster to the world, massacred countless lives." Sitting beside Tian Bui, Peak of the Wind head Xing Shuchang frowned and said, "Don't tell me that with Yun Valley Master's exceptional skills, plus Fenxiang Valley's entire strength, we still cannot deal with this evil demon?" Yun Elon's face dimmed, said, "Everyone must be joking. It is not that our valley is afraid of trouble, do not dare to take up the responsibility. It is really because I know this is no small matter, not something Fenxiang Valley alone can handle. Therefore I took the liberty to come here, plead Reverend for the sake of the common people, to call out, let the world fight together, only then will there be hope of victory. Or else the great matter will fail, the world's living beings will suffer countless casualties." The Qin Yun sect people looked at each other. It was true, everything was going well. Fenxiang Valley suddenly jumped out and said there was a peerless evil demon, forcing all the cultivators in the world to fight together for there to be hope. How could they accept it? But Reverend Daoxian was after all an enlightened cultivator. After pondering for a long time, he resolutely said, "If the matter is really as Yun Valley Master said, it will be an unprecedented calamity for the common people. We as cultivators have always prided ourselves on the righteous way, we definitely cannot ignore it. Since it is so, our Qin Yun sect will join hands with Fenxiang Valley to fight against this evil demon. Later I will send another letter to Tianyin Temple Puhong Master, invite him to come to Qin Yun Hill for a discussion." Yun Elon heaved a long sigh, clapped his hands and said, "This is very good, little brother can then be at ease." Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, "Yun Valley Master must be joking. Oh right, I wonder what is the second important matter, could it be another calamity?" Yun Elon's eyes flashed, looked deeply at Reverend Daoxian, and said, "Not so, this second matter is a good thing." Reverend Daoxian's lips revealed a trace of smile. Yun Elon smiled and said, "The second matter that I am here for is for disciple Li Sun, to propose to your honorable sect Lu Sweki Miss Lu." Once the words were spoken, Lu Sweki, who was standing behind Shueiyue Master, was startled, abruptly raised her head, and Qin Yun's sect immediately like a boiling pot. An uproar. This reaction was even more shocking than when they heard there was a peerless evil demon calamity. Innumerable eyes instantly looked at Lu Sueki's stunned face. The next moment, were attracted by Reverend Daoxian. Qin Yun's sect head, Reverend Daoxian pondered for a moment, loudly said, I have seen Li Sun, this child, for the past few days. He is indeed a dragon among men. His future is limitless. Yun Ilan smiled and said, Reverend is flattering me, but I do indeed intend to pass the Valley Master position to this good-for-nothing disciple, and with the great enemy before us, we have such a joyous matter. It shows our sincere cooperation. At the same time it also raises the morale of the world's heroes. What does Reverend think? Tian Bui, who was sitting beside, had a face of disdain, almost snorted out. Luckily his wife Su Ru was quick, pulled him back. Reverend Daoxian's eyes shifted, swept past the Qin Yun sect people, and finally landed on Lu Sueki. Lu Sueki frowned tightly, her lips trembling slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but considering the occasion, she did not say it out loud. Reverend Daoxian smiled, turned to Yun Ilan and said, Yun Valley Master's good intention is really unexpected. Yun Ilan cupped his fists, smiled and said, My disciple and I are completely sincere. Hope Reverend will grant our wish. Reverend Daoxian stretched his hand to his chest, stroked his long beard, slowly said, Natural evil, calamity is imminent. We need both our sects to work together. Only then can we save the common people. And this marriage, a perfect match, I am also very fond of it. There was another uproar in Qin Yun's sect. No one expected. Reverend Daoxian actually agreed to this marriage. Reverend Daoxian then turned to Shueiyue Master sitting beside, smiled and said, Shueiyue Junior Sister, Sueki is your disciple. It should be up to you to decide. Lu Sueki's face was pale, obviously shaken by this matter. When she heard Reverend Daoxian's words, she could not help but stepped forward, called out to Shueiyue Master. Teacher. Shueiyue Master slowly raised her eyes turned to Lu Sueki's peerless face, as if trying to see something from that face. The expression in her eyes complicated. After a long silence, slowly said, Cheer, this marriage, I also agree very much. Master Li is a dragon among men, a good match. Crystal Hall, suddenly quietened down, including Tian Bui and the rest. All looked at Shueiyue Master in disbelief. Lu Sueki's body suddenly swayed. And Li Sun, at a distance, right now was already beaming with joy. Ha 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 ha! Yun Ilan's laughter broke the silence. Great, great, since both elders have agreed on this matter, Sueki, why aren't you going up quickly to thank both of them? Li Sun hurriedly ran up, knelt down and kowtowed. Yun Ilan smiled and said, Today's words will definitely be passed down through the ages, praised by the world. Wait! Suddenly, a light shout in this great hall, in this world's good faction giant Yun Ilan's voice, coldly sounded, interrupted Yun Ilan's words. The entire hall's countenance changed. Lu Sueki, dressed in white like snow, her face pale, one hand tightly holding Tianya's scabbard, slowly walked out. Reverend Daoxian's countenance changed slightly, looked at Shueiyue Master. Shueiyue Master only looked at Lu Sueki's figure, suddenly quietly sighed, closed her eyes, looking like she was not going to bother anymore. Reverend Daoxian's countenance changed again. His face slowly darkened, slowly stood up, said, Sueki, do you have anything to say? In Crystal Hall, it was silent. Everyone's eyes were looking at that white-attired lady. Her clothes gently fluttered even though there was no wind, looking from afar. Even her figure indistinctly looked like duckweed, swaying indeterminately, frail and weathered by the wind and rain. Just that her lips were pursed so tightly, her pale cheeks indistinctly had a strange flush, that pair of shoulders that started to tremble, for the first time made people feel helpless. Suddenly, she abruptly turned around, her back facing everyone in this crystal hall, facing outside that tall and majestic hall door, towards that boundless blue sky, towards the distance beyond the blue sky, towards a distant unknown place, gazing deeply. What kind of emotion was that glance? In Crystal Hall, her deep but resolute, ice-breaking and snow-slicing voice was heard, I am not willing. Far away, on the unfamiliar hilltop, the figure crawling in the dark corner suddenly trembled. The sounds of insects that had been rising and falling in the mountains were suddenly cut off. That figure slowly struggled, stood up in the shadows, as if sensing something, stared blankly into the distance. A monkey figure jumped out from his side, scurried up to his shoulder. After a long time, his voice was heard from the darkness. "Xiao Hui, why is my heart suddenly beating so fast?" Chapter 278. The calamity started in that year's spring and summer. Thousands of years later, the people of the world still remembered clearly that period of terrifying and crazy days. In the extreme south of the southern border, in the 10,000 Great Mountains, suddenly innumerable strange beasts swarmed out, their numbers uncountable, all of them bloodthirsty by nature, regardless of gender or age, killed anyone they saw. There were even more ferocious beasts who were greedy for human flesh. Wherever they passed, it was a tragic sight. This calamity broke out in the southern border region, near the 10,000 Great Mountains, swiftly spread to the entire southern border. The southern border 5 tribes Miao, Zhuang, Tu, Li, Gaoshan rose up to resist. However, when faced with countless monsters and non-humankind beings, especially among the countless ferocious monsters and non-humankind beings, there were more than 10 strange monsters that possessed especially powerful demonic powers and magics. The resistance of the 5 clans was no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. In the blink of an eye, the 5 clans were defeated, and the southern region was plunged into an abyss of misery and suffering. This matter immediately shook the world and spread throughout the world. The common people of the Central Plains were terrified every day and were in a constant state of anxiety. Some of the common people of the Central Plains near the southern border dragged their families and fled to the north, hoping to be as far away from this calamity as possible. The cultivators of the world were all shocked. Even the good and evil sects who had always been fighting openly and covertly stopped temporarily, secretly watching the movements in the south, and started to plan their own countermeasures. The southern good faction Big Sect Fenxiang Valley, because the Valley Master Yun Ilan happened to be leading most of the disciples to Qing Yun Hill to visit Reverend Daoxian, luckily escaped the calamity. It was rumored that after the incident, Yun Ilan Valley Master who was at Qing Yun Hill heard of the tragic state of the southern border commoners, pounded his chest and stamped his feet in anguish, said that if he was around, he would never allow the evildoer to harm the commoners. His words were filled with sorrow and self-reproach. He already had the intention to commit suicide to apologize to the world. Luckily his left and right disciples held him back, and with Qing Yun sect elders persuading him with kind words, Yun Valley Master then calmed down, vowed to use the entire Fenxiang Valley's strength to avenge the southern border commoners. Not long after, Yun Ilan announced to the cultivators of the world at Qing Yun Hill, explained that today's calamity was caused by a demonic beast. This demonic beast was powerful, savage in nature. Unless the world joined forces, it could not be stopped. In view of this, Fenxiang Valley and Qing Yun sect together called out to the cultivators of the world to use the world's strength to exterminate this evil. The next day, Tian Yin Temple, who received the news, made an official response, agreed to Qing Yun, burning incense's call. In a few days they would send someone over for the alliance meeting. The righteous faction anxiously gathered and discussed, and sent several batches of outstanding disciples to the south to investigate the background of these strange beasts. After all, only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. And the usually arrogant evil sect 3 big branches Ghost King sect, Wandu clan and Hehuan sect instead quietened down, seemed to be observing each other and not in a hurry to take any action. It was in this situation where a storm was brewing that the Central Plains temporarily fell into a strange tranquility. This strange peace was finally broken the day before the arrival of the summer solstice. The strange beasts that had ravaged the southern border beyond recognition finally killed their way into the Central Plains. But in the beginning, there were not many casualties among the common people, because as early as a month ago, the common people near the south had already fled. Just that the number of the strange beasts seemed to be increasing, and also spread out even faster, looking like they were about to force their way into the Central Plains hinterland. At that time, it would be the time for the common people to descend into misery. It was hard to tell whether it was shocking news or a rumor that was hard to distinguish between truth and falsehood, but shocking news indeed came one after another. Yesterday, it was said that a village had been massacred, and today, it was said that an entire city had been turned into ruins. Everyone lived every day in fear and terror. All were so unbearable and panicky. Just that, to those who had lost all hope, even if everyone in the world died, it seemed to have nothing to do with them. Ghostly, Zhou Yixian, Xiao Huan and Wild Dog had been together for more than a month. Even he himself did not know why he kept following them. Maybe he had long felt that there was no place for him to go and just let nature take its course. In the group, Zhou Yixian was the one who was most opposed to having Ghostly with him, not to mention having an additional fellow to eat for free. He did not know how to carry luggage or do odd jobs like Wild Dog Taoist, all day if he was not drinking then sleeping. Instead, he often needed someone to take care of him. And to talk about eating for free, Ghostly only drank a little wine. Zhou Yixian's biggest thorn in his side was instead that three-eyed monkey. Xiao Hui not only had an astonishing appetite, his alcohol tolerance was also far from Ghostly, who would get drunk the moment he drank a big bag of strong wine. The monkey's face did not even turn red. His face did not even blush. If not for Tawny's insistence to bring this man and monkey along, Zhou Yixian would have run as far as he could. As for Wild Dog Taoist, ever since that night when he suddenly had the murderous intent to plot against Ghostly but was discovered and stopped by Xiao Hui, in the end he was instead spared by Ghostly. From then on, Wild Dog Taoist became even more taciturn, often did not speak a word for several days. But these few days, no matter if it was the nagging Zhou Yixian or Xiao Huan, including the silent Wild Dog Taoist, they all gradually discovered that Ghostly seemed to have some changes, although it was difficult for them to say it clearly. But Ghostly was indeed gradually waking up. The most obvious sign was that his drunkenness started to lessen. Sometimes he did not drink for the whole night, but his behavior was still very strange. Ghostly often sat together with Xiao Hui, facing the north direction, in a daze, as if thinking about something. The news of the calamity in the south, following the citizens fleeing to the north, gradually spread. Zhou Yixian and the rest also knew about it. Among them, Zhou Yixian was first stunned after hearing the news, and then after pondering for a long time, shook his head and then sighed all day, said where should they escape to? As for the others, they were not as worried as him. Ghostly and Wild Dog Taoist looked preoccupied. Xiao Huan did not seem to care about that distant danger. To her, playing with Xiao Hui, occasionally taking care of Ghostly and chatting with him, the days were also very enjoyable. But under Zhou Yixian's insistence, they eventually headed north. According to Zhou Yixian, the further they were from the south, at least their lives would be easier. But following the increasing number of refugees from the south, the situation in the news also seemed to be worsening. The monsters from the 10,000 Great Mountains were like hot knife cutting through butter, devouring their way, and had gradually forced their way into Central Plains hinterland. A few days ago, among the many news, there was even one that said, the monsters had already killed their way to a city several hundred miles behind them, scaring Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan and the rest into hurrying on their way, although they soon found out that the news was just a rumor. But the fear in the hearts of the people, it could be seen. Deep into the night, the group of them camped in the wilderness, built a fire on a small hill and sat around the fire. Only Ghostly sat at a distance. Xiao Hui jumped out from the darkness, carrying a number of wild fruits in its hands, not knowing where it picked them from. With 2 or 3 leaps, jumped onto Ghostly's shoulder, sat down and started eating. Zhou Yixian glanced over, after a moment, looked at Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, said, I have something I want to tell all of you. Xiao Huan felt puzzled, glanced at Zhou Yixian and said, Grandfather, what is it? Zhou Yixian was about to speak. Suddenly Xiao Hui, who was sitting on Ghost Li's shoulder, seemed to have discovered something, loudly called out. Everyone was shocked, not knowing what was going on. One by one stood up, walked behind Xiao Hui and looked at the direction where its limbs were dancing. Under the dim light, on the ancient path at the foot of the hill, a group of people walked over. There were men, women, old and young, all of them looked exhausted, but they still staggered forward. Zhou Yixian watched for a long while, sighed and said, They are the refugees from the south. Everyone was silent, no one spoke. Zhou Yixian was silent for a moment, said, Actually what I wanted to say is this. Right now we do not know what is going on in the south, but suddenly many monsters appeared and killed people on sight. This can't be wrong. These few days we have seen many people fleeing towards the north. I think we have to speed up our journey and run towards the north. Xiao Huan frowned, said, Grandfather, heading north is right, anyway we have always been wandering around, but the north is so big, I heard those monsters move especially fast. Do you have a good place to hide? Zhou Yixian glared at her, said, Didn't you hear the rumors these few days? Those monsters have some abilities, some have sharp noses, some have good hearing. No matter if you hide in the trees, in the cellars, or even deep in the mountains, you will be found and eaten. Encountering this kind of goddamn monsters, where can I find a place to hide? Xiao Huan's face turned bitter, said, Then what do we do? Are we going to be eaten by those monsters sooner or later? Zhou Yixian snorted, said, Nonsense, Zhou Great Celestial has divine foresight, how can I die in the mouths of these beasts? I have already calculated, right now in the whole world, there is only one place that is the safest. Xiao Huan was surprised, Wild Dog Taoist and even Ghost Li's body moved, looked towards Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian unconsciously became complacent, laughed twice. Xiao Huan was surprised and happy, said, Grandfather, there is actually such a place, quickly say it. Zhou Yixian coughed twice, then solemnly said, Qingyun Hill. Wild Dog Taoist's countenance changed, Ghostly turned his head away. Only Xiao Huan was surprised, said, I know Qingyun Hill is where Qingyun's sect is. There are many cultivators, but after all it is only a faction's strength. Encountering those strange beasts and tribes, it is already good enough to protect themselves. How would they have the time to care about us? Zhou Yixian laughed, said, This you don't know, although there is no news yet, but I am sure Fenxiang Valley and Tianyin Temple sects will definitely be at Qingyun meeting, because Yun Ilan, that old fellow, is at Qingyun right now. In addition to the Battle of Qingyun 10 years ago, Qingyun sect's Zhu Xian sword formation. Ghostly heard these words, his body shook violently. But Zhou Yixian did not notice him, continued excitedly, said, Qingyun sect's Zhu Xian sword formation is in the limelight. Everyone knows that sword formation has earth-shattering supernatural powers, so if we are at Qingyun meeting, at least we will have an additional layer of safety. I think the world's good faction cultivators, most likely in a few days, will go to Qingyun to fight against this unprecedented calamity together. If we are at Qingyun, naturally we will be at the safest place. There are so many cultivators, they won't just leave us commoners to die. After speaking, the more he thought, the more complacent he was, couldn't help but laughed out. A cold snort was suddenly heard in his laughter. Zhou Yixian was surprised. Together with Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist looked over. Ghostly slowly stood up from the shadows, but did not turn, coldly said, I'm afraid those good faction masters will not only leave you to die, they will also give you a kick in the back. Being mocked in his face, Zhou Yixian felt embarrassed, angrily said, Pay, anyway you are a crooked devil, even if you go, you will be chased out. Xiao Huan suddenly shouted, Grandpa. Zhou Yixian glanced at Xiao Huan, knew his words were too harsh, angrily shut his mouth. Xiao Huan turned and looked at Ghostly, hesitated but eventually still said, You don't listen to my grandpa, he is just this kind of blabbermouth. Zhou Yixian was enraged, interrupted, You dare to say your own grandpa blabbermouth. Xiao Huan ignored him, still spoke to Ghostly, but the situation now is really not good. You better come with us, after all that place will be safer than other places. Not waiting for Xiao Huan to finish, Ghostly indifferently said, No need, the world is so big, I have my own place to go. After speaking, his body moved, walked forward. Xiao Huan was shocked, anxiety appeared on her face, anxiously said, Zhang. Where are you going? Ghostly did not reply. His figure gradually sped up. Xiao Hui, who was crouching on his shoulder, turned its head, looked at Xiao Huan, who was staring blankly from the small hilltop, grinned, raised its hand and waved. Xiao Huan looked at that swiftly disappearing figure, for some reason, suddenly felt an emptiness in her heart, her nose turned sour, tears almost flowed down. See. Chapter 279. A light-piercing sound. Ghost Li's figure streaked across the night sky. The dark clouds in the sky were heavy, not a single star could be seen, as if even the sky was affected by the catastrophe in the south, appeared dark and gloomy, not giving one any hope. After leaving Zhou Yixuan and the rest, Ghost Li flew towards the south for a period of time, just that in this night sky, under the dark clouds, all directions were gloomy and dark, the wilderness and mountains under the sky, desolate and desolate, the people in the air were also empty, not knowing where to go. Xiao Hui, who was crouching on his shoulder, suddenly called out twice. Ghostly glanced at it, saw 3 eyes in front of him. Xiao Hui was grinning to it, most of the time it seemed to be happy. Ghost Li's face revealed a rare smile and affection, gently patted the monkey's head. His body sank down and landed on the ground. The place where they landed was a high mountain in the wilderness with a dense forest. Looking at the lush vegetation and dense shrubs, it was hard to find a place to step on in the forest. It seemed that no one had ever come to this mountain and forest in the wilderness. Ghost Li's face was indifferent, landed in the forest. Before he landed, his right hand shook, the soul-devouring stick flew out from his sleeve, circled one round under his feet. No strange sound was heard. In a blink, within a radius of 6 chi, all the trees, shrubs, brambles suddenly withered, in a blink turned into withered branches. And following the soul-devouring stick flying back to his hand, Ghostly clearly felt a thin cold air moving around the black stick. Xiao Hui happily called out, jumped down from his shoulder, and ran deep into the forest. Ghostly looked up at Xiao Hui's back figure. Ever since he went to the southern border, especially after Xiao Hui transformed, its appetite started to increase rapidly, always thinking of eating. The night was deep, the night breeze blew from the wilderness, brushing past this stretch of forest. The forest made wave-like sounds, numerous shadows swayed together. Ghostly slowly sat down, slowly closed his eyes. The surrounding tree shadows brushed past his face. In the darkness, he was like a silent spirit. After an unknown period of time, a low roar was heard indistinctly from afar and then disappeared without a trace. Ghostly frowned slightly, opened his eyes, but his body did not move. As expected, after a moment, the nearby bushes shook. It was the monkey Xiao Hui running back. The sharp and annoying brambles to Xiao Hui did not seem to be a threat. Many times it just stepped over them. Running nearer, Ghostly saw it clearly. One of Xiao Hui's hand was on its chest, hugging a few wild fruits, but the other hand was dragging behind it, like it was pulling something. Ghostly could not help but felt puzzled, glanced behind it, and was shocked. In the shadows, Xiao Hui was actually dragging something that looked like an animal as it ran back. That animal was not small, much bigger than Xiao Hui, but Xiao Hui was able to drag it very easily. After a while, Xiao Hui had already ran nearer, laughed and put down the wild fruits first, then waved its hand. A muffled sound, a large thing fell in front. That was a mature wild boar. Its head was extremely huge, most likely even taller than Xiao Hui, but right now there was a hole on the wild boar's head. Its body was bleeding, it was already dead. Ghostly looked at the wound, saw that it was still fresh, was stunned for a moment and said to Xiao Hui, "You caught it?" Xiao Hui grinned, at the same time pointed at the wild boar and then at Ghostly. Ghostly sighed, smiled and said, "I am not hungry." Xiao Hui scratched its head, its 3 eyes blinked and then pointed at the wild boar and then at itself. Ghostly was amused by it, and could not help but laugh. For a moment the heaviness in his heart lightened, smiled and said, "All right, I will help you." Xiao Hui immediately beamed with joy. Obviously it knew Ghostly's skills were extraordinary and it was its favorite. Ghostly rolled up his sleeves, his fingers like a knife, lightly slashed across the wild boar's belly. Immediately the tough boar skin was cut open. His movements were familiar. In 2 or 3 moves he skinned the wild boar, and then flew up to find a place with spring water to wash the boar, set up a fire and started to roast the boar. The fire gradually grew brighter. Xiao Hui and Ghostly's faces were illuminated by the fire. Xiao Hui had already finished the wild fruits. Right now its eyes were staring at the roasted boar which was emitting a fragrance. Ghostly slowly took out all kinds of self-made spices from his waist and added some to the meat, then found a small bottle of sesame oil and started to drip it lightly on the boar. The sesame oil slowly flowed along the boar. As it was roasted by the fire, it slowly seeped into the meat. Very quickly, the surface of the boar started to turn a faint golden color. Transparent oil droplets oozed out from the boar, an alluring fragrance wafted out. The fire flickered, illuminating the monkeys' and humans' faces, also illuminating the surrounding small open space and trees. The reflections of the tall trees swayed, as if there was a wind whistling. Ghostly looked at the burning fire in front of him, gradually lost in thought, while Xiao Hui looked at the roasted boar with a drooling expression, rubbing its ears and scratching its cheeks, at times running to the side to pluck some branches to add into the fire. In the quiet air, a strange and alluring fragrance pervaded. Deep in the forest, a low roar was suddenly heard. Ho! That roar was deep and powerful, seemed to be very far away, but it was still clearly transmitted over. A murderous intent swiftly spread out. Ghostly abruptly awoke from his deep thoughts. His brows slowly frowned. His body did not move, but his gaze gradually deepened, looking towards the direction of the roar. Xiao Hui with a swoosh jumped onto Ghostly's shoulder. Its face also did not show any fear, also turned and looked. In the fire, a sound was heard, a branch exploded, the wild boar's fragrance became stronger. 3 feet away, it was the dark forest. The wind in the forest seemed to have suddenly picked up, making whistling sounds. After that low roar, there was no more sound, but that cold and austere killing intent seemed to have a tangible quality as it rapidly approached this place. Ghostly's pupils contracted slightly, his brows frowned even tighter. Crackle! The other twig finally burst apart as well. Suddenly, the whistling wind lost its sound, the entire forest seemed to have stopped, there was no more sound. In the darkness ahead, the dense forest and the intertwining brambles suddenly fell to the sides, revealing a narrow path that could only fit one person. A youth dressed in brightly colored silk clothes, his face handsome to the point of almost having a flirtatious feeling, walked out step by step from the darkness. In the darkness, he was actually so conspicuous, as if the surroundings were lit up because of him. Ghostly did not get up, did not move, still on the ground, his eyes looking straight at this youth. That youth looked at Ghostly and then at Xiao Hui, slightly stunned, with a sound said, "Three-eyed spiritual monkey." Ghostly did not speak, but Xiao Hui suddenly started to cry out, looking very angry. Almost at the same time when Xiao Hui called out, that deep roar sounded again. The only difference was, this time the roar came directly from the youth's back. Roar! Following this deep and powerful roar, an extremely malevolent monster head slowly rose from the back of the calm-looking youth's shoulder. It had 4 eyes, and 2 pairs of eyes were on either side of its face. They were as thick as copper bells. The mouth was extremely huge, almost as wide as the face. When it opened its mouth, sharp teeth could be seen, especially the 6 sharp fangs protruding from the mouth. It was even more terrifying. Under the dim light of the flames, drops of saliva could indistinctly be seen dripping from between the teeth, landing on the monster's grayish-black skin full of lumps. Ghostly's countenance finally changed. He slowly stood up, coldly said, "Tao Tai." That youth had not replied, his eyes still assessing Ghostly. Suddenly he seemed to have sensed something and turned to look at the Tao Tai. Note 1. Couldn't help but was startled. This ferocious beast's ferocious gaze right now had even more greed, but its target was not Ghostly and Xiao Hui, but the wild boar which was being roasted on the ground. The tempting aroma of roasted meat wafted in the air. The youth suddenly laughed, said to Ghostly, "Your cooking is not bad. I was wondering why the Tao Tai was restless tonight, didn't expect it was attracted by you." Ghostly indifferently said, "Although the Tao Tai is an ancient ferocious beast, ferocious and swift, but it has always been gluttonous, a roasted boar is nothing." The youth shook his head, said, "Not so, this Tao Tai of mine is different from the others, ordinary delicacies have long disregarded it, didn't expect it to be gluttonous to this extent by your crudely roasted meat." Right now it was as that youth had said. The Tao Tai seemed to be especially fond of this roasted boar. Saliva flowed down from its mouth, and along the gaps of its teeth. Suddenly a whistle, the Tao Tai jumped out from the youth's shoulder, turned into a black shadow, and pounced towards the fire. Unexpectedly a grey shadow flashed, angry sounds were heard. It was Xiao Hui who leapt across the sky, blocking in front of the roasted boar. The Tao Tai, with a low roar, landed on the ground and revealed its real body. It had 4 sharp claws. Its body looked to be at least 4 times bigger than that wild boar. The strangest thing was its neck was extremely long, rising upwards, almost doubling the height of its body. Compared to it, Xiao Hui was pitifully small, but for some reason, the Tao Tai seemed to be fearful of Xiao Hui and did not dare to be careless. Just that it could not bear to part with the delicacy in front of it, it growled softly. Its expression also gradually turned ferocious. Ghostly looked at the 2 beasts who were angrily confronting each other over the roasted boar, suddenly said, "This wild boar is not finished roasting, the taste is also not at the right temperature. What are you 2 fighting for?" His words were baffling. Even that youth could not help but take another look at him, but the 2 beasts reacted. The Tao Tai's 4 eyes stared at Xiao Hui. Xiao Hui also stared with 3 eyes. The 2 beasts' 7 eyes stared, one bigger than the other. After a moment, Xiao Hui called out a few times at the Tao Tai, bared its teeth and then ran a few steps back, sat down beside Ghostly, its eyes staring straight at the roasted boar. The Tao Tai's 4 eyes followed Xiao Hui's movements. After Xiao Hui sat down, this ferocious beast called out twice, inconceivably also slowly walked to the other side of the fire, retracted its hind legs, swung its forelegs lightly, actually also crouched down in front of the fire. Saliva still flowed out uncontrollably from its mouth. Other than looking horrifying, it also looked somewhat funny. That youth watched the Tao Tai sit down, slowly walked over, did not seem to care about the filth on the ground, sat down beside the Tao Tai, looked at Ghostly, smiled and said, "Who is your distinguished self? I did not expect you to have such means." Even the Tao Tai can temporarily suppress its ferocious nature. Ghostly did not look at him, sat down, his eyes drifted back to the fire, said, "You and I met by chance deep in the mountains. Why do we need to know each other's names? It is only a roasted boar, only to fill one's stomach." The youth looked at Ghostly for a while, suddenly laughed loudly. His laughter loud and clear, startling countless night birds in the distance. "Well said, well said." He lightly tapped his leg, a look of praise on his face, said, "What a good only to fill one's stomach. Speaking of which, all the living beings in the world, busy themselves all day, isn't it just to fill one's stomach? In that case, the so-called human that you said, isn't it also the same as me, this Tao Tai evil beast? There is no difference?" Ghostly gently flipped the roasted boar. The fragrance of sesame oil on the boar immediately thickened, tempting the Taotai opposite to him for a while but not knowing if it was to savor the delicacy or for something else. This strange beast, other than being ferocious and also known for its gluttony, actually endured it, and at the same time Xiao Hui fiercely glared at it. The fire quietly burned, reflecting on Ghost Li's face. He slowly said, "There are differences between humans." The youth said, "What?" Ghost Li said, "Love and hate, affection and enmity. Humans have feelings." The youth laughed loudly, said, "Don't know the beasts also have feelings? You killed this wild boar, you should know the wild boar's pain and fear. Just like when I kill you, you will also be like a boar. All living beings are equal. Where is the difference between humans and beast?" Ghost Li looked up, looked at the youth, said, "There is a difference." The youth's gaze turned sharp, said, "What difference?" Ghost Li said, "I have a great regret in my life, day and night engraved in my heart. Living is worse than death, but I cannot not live. Living I still have hope, dying I will be a heartless and cowardly person. This kind of affection and enmity, how can a pig have it?" The youth was startled, the sharpness in his eyes gradually faded, and then a strange expression appeared on his face. Note 1. Taotai, Strange Gods and Demons. Strange Beasts Chapter. In the extreme south of the Divine Prefecture, there is an evil beast, 4 eyes, black skin, long neck and 4 legs, its nature ferocious, extremely gluttonous. It advances as swift as the wind, wreaking havoc. Chapter 280. Silence all around, only the occasional crackling of branches could be heard from the fire. That strange young man and Ghost Li did not speak again. The fire expanded and contracted, burning between them. The color and luster of the roasted pig gradually turned golden, in the midst of the rich aroma. At the same time a faint burnt smell emerged. The entire surface of the roasted pig was covered by a transparent layer of faint oil droplets. Ghost Li finally turned the roasted pig a few times, said, "It's done, all of you can eat." He had just finished speaking. Xiao Hui and the Taotai pounced forward at the same time. Xiao Hui Zizi called out, stretched out its hand and grabbed one of the hind legs of the roasted pig. The pig's skin, which was roasted hot, did not seem to feel anything in its hand. Just that the Taotai was even more powerful, it did not move its limbs or claws, directly opened its bloody mouth, disregarding the fact that the pork was still above the fire, directly stuck its head in and bit down. The Taotai's mouth, which was already huge, became even more frightening. Such a huge roasted pig was actually bitten by this strange beast, leaving only one hind leg which was held outside by Xiao Hui. Xiao Hui was enraged, its monkey face revealed an angry expression, its hand grabbed the pig leg and refused to let go, at the same time jumping and shouting. The Taotai evil beast did not care so much. Its mouth full of sharp teeth bit down, immediately like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. It bit the delicious pork into 2. Xiao Hui was caught off guard. For a moment it used too much strength and fell backwards, rolled twice on the ground. When it stood up, its hand was only holding onto a pig leg. As for the majority of that delicious roasted pig, right now it was in the Taotai's mouth, chewing loudly. The remaining pig bones were also directly crushed and swallowed into its stomach, like a tornado sweeping away the clouds, sweeping away an army of 1,000. Especially the 4 eyes on its face, squeezed to the sides of its face by the bulging big mouth. The 4 eyes were still shining brightly. Obviously it was eating to its heart's content. Zizi, Xiao Hui saw that half of its delicacy was snatched away by this ferocious beast. How could it not be angry? But after calling out a few times, abruptly lowered its head and also started to chew. It ate extremely fast. In a short while, it had already finished half of the pig leg. Ho! The Taotai's deep roar sounded again. It slowly turned its head to look at Xiao Hui. Such a huge roasted pig. In just a short while, it had already eaten it cleanly, swallowed it whole, not even the bones were left. And very obviously, the Taotai was not satisfied. Its 4 eyes were glowing, staring straight at the last piece of meat bone in Xiao Hui's hand. Xiao Hui ferociously ate the last piece of meat, its 3 eyes widened at the same time, staring at the Taotai. Taotai's mouth was full of saliva, drooling with desire, step by step walked towards Xiao Hui. Xiao Hui fiercely waved his hand. The remaining bone in his hand was thrown far away in another direction. At the same time his face revealed a gloating expression. Unexpectedly Taotai's figure flashed, like lightning. In a blink of an eye it soared up, caught up to the flying meat bone, bit it, made a turn in the air and flew back, landing beside that young man. Just that right now Taotai also seemed to know that this was the last thing, did not swallow it in one mouthful. Instead it looked like it cherished it very much, stuck out its tongue, and kept on licking the meat bone. Xiao Hui was startled by Taotai's actions. After a while it turned to Ghostly, suddenly waved its hands and feet, calling out. Ghostly looked at it for a while. Suddenly his expression changed, said, "You said it looks like De Huang?" Xiao Hui immediately nodded and then looked at Taotai. The anger on its face gradually faded. Replacing it was a kind of unfamiliar but warm expression. It watched Taotai for a while and then carefully moved over, slowly stretched out its hand, looking like it wanted to touch Taotai's hideous head. Taotai's ferocious head turned, warily growled in a low voice. Xiao Hui immediately jumped back, but then called out twice quietly, again approached Taotai, and Taotai's attention also seemed to temporarily leave the meat bone, on Xiao Hui. After a while, Xiao Hui's hand again stretched over. Taotai did not move, but its 4 eyes were watching Xiao Hui's hand, while Ghostly and that young man remained silent, especially that young man's eyes had a strange glint, quietly watching the interaction between these two strange beasts. Xiao Hui's hand touched Taotai's head, gently stroked it. Taotai quietly growled twice but did not have any intention to object. Its attention once again returned to that meat bone in front of it. Xiao Hui then slowly approached this strange beast, using its hand to gently stroke Taotai's body. Its monkey face revealed a happy expression. Ghostly slowly lowered his head, vaguely remembered many years ago at Big Bamboo Valley. Xiao Hui and De Huang seemed to have become close like this. Time flowed like water, so Xiao Hui still remembered that time. That young man suddenly broke the silence, said with a smile, "Didn't expect both of them to be so fated, isn't it?" Ghostly glanced at Xiao Hui and Taotai, a trace of warmth in his eyes, said, "That's right." The young man turned his head, added a small branch to the fire, and then became silent again. After a long time he suddenly laughed and said, "This Taotai has followed me for who knows how many years. I always thought it was me who was taking care of it. Didn't expect to discover today that it is actually much happier than me." The smile on his face seemed to have an indistinct bitterness, said, "Other than eating and drinking to its heart's content, even if it is not of the same kind, there is still you, this monkey, who is willing to be its friend." Ghostly looked up at this young man, saw his desolate expression, as if there was an indescribable loneliness, indifferently said, "If you are lonely, just go find a friend." That young man snorted, proudly said, "In this world, who is worthy to be my friend, and who dares to be my friend?" Ghostly frowned. This young man's tone was really exaggerated. He felt a little disgusted, but the young man seemed to recall something. His face dimmed, quietly muttered to himself, "But there is actually one person, I sincerely believe her." Ghostly looked at him through the burning fire, indifferently said, "How?" That young man's face suddenly turned cold, sneered and said, "Later on, I then discovered that she was lying to me. Not only that, she also made me so miserable, almost consigned to eternal damnation." Ghostly was silent. From that young man's expression, he unexpectedly recalled that buried deep in his heart 10 years ago, that benevolent monk's face seemed to appear before his eyes again. He suddenly shook his head fiercely but exerted strength in his hand. The branch that was being added to the fire made a slight hoarse sound, turned into powder, scattered all over the ground. The young man glanced at his hand, suddenly said, "You also have such a sad past?" Ghostly's face was gloomy, did not speak. That young man looked at him, a glint in his eyes, suddenly said, "If you are going to die now, do you still have any unfulfilled wishes?" Ghostly was surprised, a wave of confusion in his heart. In that instant thousands of thoughts came flooding in. This question that he had never thought of, suddenly placed in front of him, deep enmity, great hatred, 10 years of long-cherished wish, lingering white clothes, in this life of wind and rain. He had never thought that deep in his heart, what last wish did he have? It should be to save Baiyao. If he could save her, even if he died, he would be willing. This thought, in the countless nights of these 10 years, he did not know how many times he had thought about it. Just that there was still that frosty face. In the end he could not give it up. In the secluded corner of his heart, gently drifting, for a moment he was dazed. The night wind whistled, not knowing how much time had passed. When he woke up with a start, that young man had already disappeared. The Taotai on the ground seemed to have just soared up into the sky, merging into one with the darkness of the night. Its deep, deep roars were heard from afar. Xiao Hui scurried up his shoulder, called out twice. Ghostly slowly looked up at the sky, suddenly quietly said, "Xiao Hui, I still have to see her one more time, right?" Xiao Hui did not seem to understand and was too lazy to bother. Its monkey head also looked up at the sky, seemed to be still searching for the Taotai. The embers of the gradually extinguished bonfire gradually turned into a wisp of smoke, gently drifted away. Ghostly and Xiao Hui stood quietly in this deep forest. For a long, long time, in the night wind, only faint low sounds could be heard. Still have to see her one more time. This world catastrophe. With the passing of time, the situation became more tragic. The strange beasts had already killed their way into the central plains. The common people suffered heavy casualties. The good faction disciples who were sent out to investigate had mostly disappeared. A few of them with slightly higher skills came back. All of them were wounded, and when they reported to the various good faction teachers, they spoke of the horrors of the strange beasts. The people in the world were plunged into misery and suffering. The good faction were helpless. At this time the news of Qing Yun sect, Tianyin Temple, Fenxiang Valley, 3 big good faction sects meeting at Qing Yun Hill and inviting the world's good faction to join hands to deal with this calamity. Immediately the world's cultivators started to gather at Qing Yun Hill. In just a few days, the vicinity of Qing Yun Hill had an unprecedented number of people, and most of them were Central Plains common people who had fled here. In their eyes, these immortal-like cultivators at Qing Yun Hill were already their last hope. Qing Yun sect, who was in charge of reception, was extremely busy. More and more fellow cultivators and common people came to Qing Yun. Very soon Qing Yun sect Tong Tian Peak's guest rooms were not enough. They had to ask the other branches to also open their guest rooms. Fortunately Qing Yun sect was after all a 1,000 years big sect, with deep roots and great assets. In the end they still accommodated. But the small Bamboo Valley branch of the 7 branches, because it had always been female disciples, and because Shueiyue Master's temperament was strange, it was not opened to the public. Many of the young disciples who had admired it for a long time felt it was a pity. But no matter what, although the calamity was before them, but this was still an unprecedented good faction big gathering, Qing Yun sect as the host. Their reputation was even more than before. Indistinctly the world already had the intention to follow Qing Yun sect's lead, and Qing Yun sect head Reverend Daoxian, right now even more firmly sat on the world's #1 person position. At night, Qing Yun Hill range up and down the peaks were brightly lit. It was really a grand occasion that had not been seen for thousands of years. Far below the mountain, following the mountain breeze, one could almost hear the people's loud chatter and laughter. The people who were afraid because of the calamity, under such circumstances, seemed to feel much more relaxed. After all, even if the sky collapsed, wasn't there still Qing Yun Hill above their heads? And right now the quietest place on Qing Yun Hill was probably Small Bamboo Valley. After Qing Yun sect's kind explanation, all the sects strictly restricted their disciples, strictly prohibited them from going near Small Bamboo Valley. After all, in the current situation, if there was still a farce of lecherous prodigal son, most likely no one would look good. Compared to the hustle and bustle of the other peaks, Small Bamboo Valley appeared much quieter. Occasionally 2 or 3 beautiful Small Bamboo Valley female disciples would pass by. The mountain breeze blew gently. The tears bamboos all over the mountain swayed together, making rustling sounds. This night the moonlight was clear and cold, shone on the Small Bamboo Valley mountain path. The bamboo shadows danced, the shadows wavering on the mountain step. From afar, 4 or 5 Small Bamboo Valley female disciples walked over. The one in front was Wenmin. These female disciples, including Wenmin, all looked gloomy, their brows frowning, seemed to be troubled. Chapter 281. The cold wind blew past the bamboo forest. There seemed to be dark shadows flashing. The youngest girl beside Wenmin looked to be only about 13 years old, rather timid, glanced at that dark place, her face slightly pale, went closer to Wenmin, pulled her clothes, softly said, Big senior sister, there seems to be someone there." Wenmin and the rest were shocked, looked over together. The next moment Wenmin revealed a smile, patted that little girl's face, said, "Xiao sure, that is the mountain breeze blowing the bamboos, the shadows of the bamboo branches swaying. Every night it is like this. You have just come up the mountain not long ago. After a period of time you will know." The girl called Xiao Sure heaved a sigh of relief, but she was still a little afraid. She seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly turned around to look at the back of the mountain, and said, "Big senior sister, there is not a single person around the full moon platform at the back of the mountain. There are these eerie things everywhere. If we leave senior sister Sweki alone there, will she be afraid?" Wenmin's face dimmed, sighed and said, "It is sect head teacher uncle who wants your Sweki senior sister to reflect there. We also have no choice but Sweki senior sister, she should not be afraid, right?" Another girl standing behind Wenmin suddenly snorted, with indignation, said, "I really don't understand why sect head teacher uncle would treat Sweki like this. Just because she refused to agree to Finxiang Valley's marriage proposal?" In the depths of the bamboo forest, there seemed to be a soft sound, as if some small beast had stepped on a bamboo branch and snapped it. However, all the girls' attention was currently drawn to the forest, so they did not hear this sound. Only the youngest Xiao Sure seemed to be a little suspicious, but when she looked into the depths of the bamboo forest, she only saw a shadow swaying. Her face couldn't help but pale again, and she hurriedly turned her head away. Wenmin sighed, said, "Actually that Li Sun brother is really not bad, a talented man with a good background. Most likely in the future the Finxiang Valley master position will be passed on to him, and looking at him, he also cherishes Sweki very much, but love really cannot be forced." Another girl suddenly grumbled in a low voice, "Teacher is really something. You know Sweki's temper, but why didn't you help her plead with sect master uncle?" The first lady shook her head and said, "I don't think it is right. Sweki is originally the most obedient to teacher and is also very respectful to sect head teacher Uncle Daoxian, but this time she openly contradicted both of them on Tong Tian Peak, I think." She suddenly lowered her voice and softly said, "Don't tell me Sweki already has someone in her heart." "Shut up." Wenmin suddenly said in a low voice. Everyone was shocked. Wenmin's face slightly relaxed, but her tone was still very stern, quietly said, "We must not speak carelessly about this kind of speculation. If it reaches sect head teacher uncle and teacher's ears, I'm afraid the consequences will be unthinkable." Everyone was silent. The lady standing behind Wenmin was silent for a moment, quietly said, "Senior sister, actually from what I see, I'm afraid what kind of people sect head teacher uncle and teacher are, how could they not think of it? This time sect leader and master intentionally agreed to Finxiang Valley's marriage proposal. I'm afraid it's because they know in Sweki's heart, there is." Wenmin abruptly turned her head and stared at her. That lady's countenance changed slightly, sighed and did not speak further. Wenmin heard her sigh, was silent for a moment and also could not help but sigh and said, "Lin junior sister, actually all of our feelings are the same, Sweki and the few of us, although we entered the sect at different times, but these 10 over years, We are already as close as sisters. No one wants to see her become like this. But, I also don't know what to say. Anyway, I think teacher has always doted on Sweki the most. After all, he will not make things too difficult for her. The other female disciples nodded together. The crowd slowly walked over, discussing in low voices. Indistinctly there were sighs, gradually walking further away. The shadows of the bamboo forest swayed. Suddenly a black figure seemed to float out from the deep darkness, landed on the mountain path. It was ghostly. In this place where enemies were all around, his face was faintly pale, was silent for a long time, and then slowly turned his head, and surveyed the rear mountain of small bamboo valley. Behind that stretch of bamboo forest, the moonlight as clear as frost, legend said that was where small bamboo valley full moon platform of the Qing Yun 6 scenic spots was located. The solitary cliff suspended in midair. Other than the back half which was connected to the mountain, most of it was suspended in the air. This night the moonlight was bright, hanging high in the sky, clear like water, like frost and snow spilled down to the mortal world, landed on this full moon platform. Although it was not as brilliant as the legendary full moon night which could illuminate the entire small bamboo valley, but the moonlight on the full moon platform was gentle, illuminating the entire cliff as bright as day, especially the smooth rocks on the ground. Because of the different angles, reflected countless moons, it looked even more cold and beautiful. When Ghostly stepped onto the full moon platform, presented in front of him was this beautiful scenery. And in that frosty moonlight there was a girl dressed in white like snow, with her back facing him, standing on the full moon platform in front of the cliff, gazing at the endless dark night, quietly standing. Ghostly's face was indifferent, but his eyes seemed to be shining because of the reflection of this beautiful moonlight. That figure in white, like a fairy standing in the moonlight, did not look the slightest bit of worldly feeling. As if sensing something, that figure moved. Lu Sweki's indifferent and slightly tired voice rang out, "Senior sister, why are you all back again?" She slowly turned her head. While speaking, her voice suddenly disappeared. Lu Sweki's usually indifferent face revealed an expression of disbelief. That man's figure quietly stood there, staring at her. "Zhang." She slightly opened her mouth. Before the words came out, her voice was already low. "Xiao Fan." Ghostly stood where he was, motionless. The moonlight shone on Lu Sweki's snow-like skin, almost transparent and flawless, adding to her soul-stirring beauty. From afar, he actually had a feeling of not daring to go near. Are you all right?" He had thousands and thousands of words in his heart, but what came out, in the end, was only these few words. Lu Sweki stared at this man, that man standing at the intersection of the moonlight and shadows. His expression was so complicated, as if there was something tormenting him in his heart, but that figure was clearly before her. That figure which she had thought of countless times in her dreams. She slightly lowered her head, wanted to speak, but stopped. After a long time, softly said, "Since you are here, why don't you come over?" Ghost Li's body shook. Xiao Hui, who had been following beside him, had also disappeared. A look of hesitation flashed past his eyes. To him, it seemed that this short few steps required a lot of courage. Lu Sweki was still standing there, silent. The mountain breeze blew over, her white clothes gently fluttered. Stepping out, walking under the moonlight, the bamboo forest behind her rustled. The girl quietly looked up. Ghostly was standing before her. Lu Sweki looked at him. The initial agitation and panic on her face quietly disappeared, suddenly said, "Still remember what I said before, the next time we meet, we will be irreconcilable enemies, you." She looked at him, slowly said, "Why do you still want to see me?" Ghost Li's lips twitched, his eyes glimmered, suddenly looked away, no longer looking at Lu Sweki. Just when Lu Sweki's expression gradually dimmed, the man in front of her slowly turned his head back, as if hesitating, as if struggling, finally softly said, "You seem to have lost weight." Lu Sweki's body shook, shock again flashed past her face, but what followed was joy. Her snow-white face, for the first time in her life, revealed a faint blush, like crystal-clear red jade, with endless tenderness and lingering shyness. Even if there was no tomorrow, even if there was still darkness ahead, but if there was warmth in the heart, maybe she would not be afraid. This beautiful and cold girl suddenly smiled, like the most beautiful lily in the night, silently smiling in the wind. Her pure white figure was that dazzling existence in the moonlight. Ghostly held his breath. Lu Sweki suddenly spoke, word by word, "I like it very much." And then, she was still smiling, her eyes gentle like lingering water ripples. The night deepened, the moon sank in the west. Standing side by side on the cliff in front of full moon platform, looking at the darkness together, the mountain breeze blew, their clothes fluttered at the same time, their figures in the clear moonlight. Gentle was the feeling of the wind blowing on their faces. In the boundless and dark sky, there were still drops of starlight quietly twinkling. Funxiang Valley people proposed marriage to you? After a long silence, Lu Sweki calmly said, "Yes, Master and Sect Head Sherbwa both agreed." Ghost Li's voice did not seem to have any change, lightly said, "On the way here, I heard your Shiji's conversation, heard you are not willing?" Lu Sweki smiled, said, "Yes, I am not willing." Ghostly turned and looked at her. What came into his eyes was Lu Sweki's indifferent face, and a trace of smile between her brows. His heart was suddenly excited, as if the excitement rose from deep in his heart. Even his body was trembling, couldn't help but blurted out, "You come with me." Lu Sweki's body trembled, looked at him, saw Ghostly no in her eyes. It was still that Zhang Shao Danan, that persevering and persistent young man? To where? Anywhere. To the ends of the earth. A smile floated on her lips, but her eyes were faintly sparkling, as if hesitating, but after a moment she still softly said, "Then Bai Yao?" Like a basin of cold water poured on his head, Ghost Li's entire body was cold. The coldness that came from the deepest part of his heart seemed to have frozen him into ice. Water-green figure, serene smile, that beautiful figure lying on the ice platform, in a blink of an eye, had completely knocked him down. He quietly lowered his head, was silent for a long time, then, when he raised his head again, the excitement on his face had already disappeared, replaced by coldness. Lu Sweki stared at his change, clearly felt the man in front of her, from the lingering warmth, slowly went away, hid into the cold darkness. She breathed deeply, her lips revealing a smile, but who could see the faint tears at the corner of her eyes, that soul-shaking beauty? Next time, Ghostly turned, slowly left. "When we meet again, you use a sword." He left without turning his head, like a resolute lover severing his love. The moonlight followed behind him, like a gentle hand powerlessly pulling, but ultimately could not hold his figure. He disappeared into the darkness. That was the way he came, and also the direction he left. On Lu Sweki's pale face, there was still a stiff faint smile, her snow-like white dress fluttering in the wind, under the moonlight, until she silently shed her first tear. The tears bamboo that covered the mountains, under the moonlight, in such a cold night, rustled. Chapter 282. Thousands of miles away, it was also the same late night. That bright moon hung high in the sky, quietly watching this mortal world. In the wilderness, there was also a person looking up at that round cold moon. His robe with long sleeves was still in Taoist attire. On his angular face, the imposing manner without anger was still indistinctly visible. The night breeze blew gently on the wilderness, the wild grass swayed. Between the fluttering clothes and silence, it was as if time also stood still. Just that, who could hold back time, in your trance? Eventually 10 years still passed. Someone sighed, the voice light, slowly drifted away in the wind. In this silence, suddenly a voice was heard from afar, with some laughter, said, "Such a beautiful scene, priest appreciating the moon alone, really in a good mood." When the voice started, it was still far away, but by the time the words were finished, it was already behind the priest. That priest inhaled deeply, turned around. Under the moonlight, it was Taoist Song Song, who 10 years ago colluded with the evil faction and betrayed Qin Yun. And standing not far behind him was Ghost King's sect head Ghost King, just that looking at him right now, although Ghost King looked normal, but his head of white hair looked much more haggard, only in his eyes, indistinctly glinted with another blazing glint, more dazzling than usual. Taoist Song Song's eyes glanced at Ghost King's hair. His calm expression changed, asked in astonishment, "Sect head, why is your hair?" Ghost King smiled faintly. Taoist Song Song's reaction was actually within his expectations. For a highly skilled person like him, even after 100 years, his appearance would not change much, but this time suddenly his hair turned white in 3 days. Like Song Song and the others who did not know the inside story were naturally shocked, thought that he had encountered some problems in his cultivation. Ghost King did not explain, even his expression did not change much, only smiled and said, "Although you and I are both cultivators, but after all we are also mortals. Gratitude and grudges, feelings and enmity, there will always be sad matters." Taoist Song Song's expression turned serious, solemnly said, "That's right, I have said too much." Ghost King shook his head and smiled, clasped his hands behind and walked to Taoist Song Song, smiled and said, "Let's not talk about it. But ever since the Qin Yun battle 10 years ago, I heard that priest has been worshipped by Wandu clan, highly revered. I wonder what urgent matter is there to suddenly ask me to meet here tonight? If this matter is known by that senior god of poison, I naturally don't care, but I'm afraid it will be very inconvenient for you." Taoist Vasp Kalo watched Ghost King for a long time. Ghost King did not ask much, still maintaining a smile, smiled and waited. After a while, Song Song sighed and said, "Sovereign, you are indeed extraordinary. To tell you the truth, I have an important matter to discuss with Sovereign tonight." Ghost King said, "Please speak." Song Song glanced at the Ghost King and said, "Sect leader, do you know that the Wandu clan's sect leader, god of poison, has passed away 3 days ago?" Taoist Song Song's voice was not loud, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder, even with Ghost King's composure. His body shook. His countenance changed greatly. He blurted out, "What?" Song Song stared intently at Ghost King and said, "God of Poison had already passed away 3 days ago. After his death, he left behind an order to pass the position of sect leader to his youngest disciple Qin Wuyan." Ghost King gradually calmed down, but his brows were still tightly knitted. His face was calm, but in his heart it was like thousands of troops and horses were surging over at the same time, all kinds of thoughts surging incessantly. Currently the evil sect's 3 main branches were in confrontation. The one he feared the most was this Wandu clan old poisonous thing. As long as he was around, Ghost King sect almost had no chance to pull Wandu clan down from the evil sect's number 1 branch position. But now, this old poisonous thing who once looked like he would never die, actually died so quietly. Ghost King inhaled deeply. His eyes returned to Taoist Song Song's face, suddenly smiled and said, "God of Poison Senior was our holy sect's highly respected senior. This time he has passed away unfortunately. It really makes one sad." His mouth was speaking words of condolence, but there was not the slightest sadness in his smile. And Taoist Song Song, who was standing opposite him, also looked indifferent. Obviously these 2 people did not have any nostalgia for that old man who had passed away. But Ghost King seemed to reveal a trace of cautiousness, said, "Before I came, why did I not hear of this news? In these 3 days, although Wandu clan was very peaceful, but there was no news leaked out at all." Taoist Song Song smiled, with slight disdain said, "After the old man died, although Qin Wuyan was ordered to take over the position of sect leader, but the other few disciples who rushed back to send him off were not willing to let it go, quarreled incessantly over this position, and temporarily suppressed the news of the old man's death. Now, other than myself and a few of the elders, Most of the Wandu clan disciples still do not know about this. What kind of person was Ghost King? Once he heard it, he understood immediately. A trace of smile surfaced on his lips. After a moment of hesitation, spoke to Taoist Song Song. This is no small matter, priest telling me about it, it is enough to show your great kindness, I am extremely grateful. Taoist Song Song smiled and said, I dare not. Ghost King's eyes glimmered, said, Does priest have anything else to say? There is no harm in saying it. Taoist Song Song snorted, said, Sect head is a hero with great talent and bold vision, I will not beat around the bush. Wandu clan now no longer has a place for me, hope sect head will take me in on the account of our acquaintance in the past. Ghost King was stunned, said, What is priest saying? With priest's character, I can't even wait for you and have been longing for you for many years. Just that priest has always held a high position in Wandu clan and is also part of the holy sect. I dare not to rashly invite you, unless there is any change after God of Poison Senior passed away? Taoist Song Song nodded and said, Sect head's foresight is like a torch. God of Poison is indeed not bad to me, but that Qin Wuyan has always been at odds with me, and this time the Wandu clan members are fighting for the position. The sect's highly skilled experts are all occupying their own mountains and confronting each other. From what I see, even if there is someone who can unify the Wandu clan and sit firmly on the position, it will definitely be a huge blow to its vitality and cannot compete for even one day. Ghost King laughed loudly. His laughter was loud and clear, reverberating in the wilderness. After a moment, he kept his smile and sternly said, Priest, don't worry, Qin Wuyan is an ignorant child and does not know priest's talent. Will priest please come to my Ghost King sect and condescend to the position of priest? Everything will be done according to your heart and there will be no worries. Taoist Song Song looked delighted, nodded and said, Thank you, sect head. Ghost King smiled and nodded, a glint in his eyes, said, Since priest and I are already one family, I will take the liberty to ask priest, among the God of Poison's disciples, who has the most hope to inherit the position of sect head? Song Song pondered for a long time and said, Although the sect's highly skilled experts are separated and confronting each other, but from what I see, in the end I'm afraid Qin Wuyan still has the highest chance of winning. Although this person is young, but his schemes are deep and he is also the direct disciple of God of Poison, he cannot be belittled. Just that a few months ago he was injured by Ghostly in the Western Death Marsh. I heard that the sinister orb's evil power is extremely strange and penetrated deep into his bone marrow, and until now he has not fully recovered. That's why his few senior brothers took advantage of the situation and rose up. If not with his abilities, those few good-for-nothing senior brothers would not be his match. Ghost King was surprised, although Ghostly's ambush of Qin Wuyan was also in the Death Marsh, but Ghostly did not reveal it to anyone. He also did not know anything about it. Now that he suddenly heard Taoist Song Song mention it, Ghostly's figure uncontrollably flashed past his mind. The glint in his eyes intensified. The intensity of his gaze, even Taoist Song Song was shocked, asked in astonishment, Sect head, what is it? Ghost King reacted, heaved a sigh of relief, smiled and said, Nothing much. Just that I did not expect that this Ghostly that I have groomed has already become a great person. I am very happy. Taoist Song Song glanced at him, his expression as usual, and did not say anything, but in his heart, Zhang Xiaofan's figure 10 years ago at Qing Yun Hill Peak also appeared. Thinking of Ghost King's expression just now, couldn't help but sneered in his heart. Majestic Fox Mountain, Ghost King sect headquarters. Descending from the sky, that magic stick glimmering with green light quietly flew back into his sleeve. Ghost Lee's figure once again appeared in front of the entrance of Ghost King sect headquarters. The few Ghost King sect disciples guarding the entrance were startled and immediately moved aside. One after another called out, Vice sect head. Ghostly did not say anything, expressionless, walked straight in. Xiao Hui crouched on his shoulder, as usual looking around, but after a while, it retracted its gaze. After all, to it, this place was too familiar. Ghostly unhurriedly walked back to his own room, pushed open the stone door. Everything in the room was exactly the same as before he left, as if no one had touched it. He stood in the room for a long time, as if thinking about something. His expression had a rare trace of hesitation and fear. Xiao Hui jumped down from his shoulder, with 2 or 3 leaps, jumped onto the bed, minding its own business, and played. Ghostly pressed his lips tightly, suddenly sighed, as if he had made up his mind, turned and walked out, then headed towards the cold stone chamber deep inside the mountain. Along the way, he met quite a number of Ghost King sect disciples, but to this vice sect head, who had disappeared for a long time and suddenly appeared, without exception they all lowered their heads and walked away. In their eyes, it seemed that the further away from this man the better. But Ghostly clearly would not notice these people's attitude, only quietly walked forward. His room was not far from the cold stone chamber. Very soon he reached it and saw that figure standing outside. Yuji. A thought suddenly flashed past Ghostly's mind. Why did it seem that every time he came to visit Bai Yao, Yuji seemed to be standing outside this stone chamber? Seemed like she really had feelings for Bai Yao. Just when he was thinking about that, Yuji seemed to have heard footsteps, looked up and seemed not expecting Ghostly to suddenly appear. Her body shook slightly. Ghostly silently nodded to her, considered as a greeting, and then walked past her, towards the cold stone chamber's door. Under the black veil, Yuji was silent. Just when Ghostly was about to push open the door, he suddenly stopped, turned and looked at Yuji, said, "You." He rarely spoke to Yuji. Right now suddenly he did not know how to address Yuji. Yuji indifferently said, "Whatever Bai Yao calls me, you should also call me that." Ghostly was silent, as if something was stirred up in his heart. Both of them were silent for a moment, but eventually it was Ghostly who spoke. "Aunt Yu, the last time when I left, I asked Qing Long Holy Envoy to send the great shaman's ashes back to southern border." Yuji's black veil nodded twice, quietly said, "Don't worry, Big Brother has already sent it, but for some reason, until now there is still no news from him." While speaking, although Yuji's expression could not be seen but her voice still revealed a trace of rare anxiety, "Recently the demon beasts are wreaking havoc in the southern border. Big Brother, although he is highly skilled, but for some reason he is still not back." Ghostly frowned, was silent for a moment, said, "Don't worry too. Qing Long Holy Envoy is highly skilled. Those demon beasts cannot do anything to him." He paused, said, "Then I will go in." Yuji silently nodded, did not speak again. Rumble, the heavy stone door emitted a deep sound, opened and closed behind him. Ghostly once again found himself in the cold stone chamber, quietly watching that serene and beautiful figure. Wisps of white air gently floated up from the ice, strand by strand drifted in the air, slowly moving, giving one an indistinct feeling of unreality. On the smooth ground, the remnants of that soul-stirring, soul-summoning guide could still be seen. The faint red color, right now seemed to have quietly blended into the stone. Ghostly's lips, for some reason, started to tremble. Slowly, he walked over step by step, stepping over the traces of red, passing through the faint white smoke. Bai Yao's serene face appeared before him. As if nothing had changed, looking at her like this, she was still 10 years ago, that beautiful young lady whom he had first met. Ghostly's body trembled even more violently before Bai Yao's stone platform. He slowly bent down, in the stone chamber, indistinctly heard the choking sounds that he tried his best to suppress but eventually could not. Suddenly, Ghostly's body swayed, with a backhand palm, actually heavily slapped himself. The loud sound after the palm and face hit, immediately reverberated in the stone chamber. The man's pain and regret seemed to only be able to vent a little in this way. "Sorry, Bai Yao, sorry." That deep voice, trying its best to suppress its own voice, so quietly said, repeated. After an unknown period of time, the stone chamber, which had regained its tranquility, was once again broken. The stone door was opened. A silver-haired ghost king unhurriedly walked in, stood behind Ghostly. Ghostly, who was crouching beside Bai Yao, moved, slowly stood up and then turned to look. The two men's eyes met, both were startled. Ghostly saw Ghost King's head full of white hair. Ghost King instead saw the 5 finger marks slowly appearing on Ghostly's face. "You are back." Ghost King's voice sounded a little strange. In the calmness there was a faint gratification, but there was another kind of indescribable strange feeling. Ghostly silently nodded. Ghost King was clearly used to Ghostly's character, did not mind, said, "Come with me for a while. There is an old acquaintance, I think you should meet her, and soon there will be a big event in our Ghost King sect." Ghostly was slightly surprised, clearly did not know who this so-called old acquaintance was, but looking at him, with his current state of mind, he also did not want to know, immediately turned and glanced at Bai Yao, as if to carve that pale face deeply in his eyes, and never change again. Then, he turned and walked out. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.